Inglewood for Bernard Placide. Stand up, mama. We going back out there. I'm gonna put that. I'm gonna need some help from these officials. I put some heat on the Queens DA on the cases of Nolan Thomas and Reverend Keith Gatson. Stand up. Are y'all in the house? I'm gonna keep calling their name on the radio. I'm gonna call it, and if they don't do something next by Christmas, Doctor, I'm gonna be a Christmas gift out there to call a Queens rally. I'm gonna give y'all a Christmas and sit down and talk seriously with us about this stuff. I'm gonna keep calling their name on the air every week. I made a commitment. Let me say this, you that are helping at the theaters, Loudmouth for the rest of the weekend and during the week, thank Katrina Jefferson for doing a great job of coordinating. And we got loudmouths all over the country. And we're going to continue with that. I'm going to raise our offering and let you go. I can't let Hakeem leave here with all the donation to the Democratic Council. He come here and got money from the DCC that he didn't even ask for. But I'm going to ask for mine. Now, I don't want none of the officials getting no money. I do not want y'all under no investigation. So if y'all up here and on public payroll, don't give me nothing. But Ruben, you're a recovering politician. So Ruben ready. He on the board, he know what we need. All right, let us raise the offering. I need about 10 people real quick. 10 people, don't make me beg in front of the new caucus chairman. I need about 10 people to give $100 or more, come quickly. My pastor, Reverend Adolphus Lacey, 100. Winston Gilchrist, 100. Ruben Diaz, 100. Brother Roberts, 100. Reverend Gatson, that's my man, we gonna get him straight, $100. You know Reverend Carey, $100. Y'all coming too quick now. Jamie Bland, $100. Michael McEwen, $100. Nolan Thomas, that's one of our brothers we fighting for, $100.
Right. And welcome committee.
Welcome committee, $100. Reverend James, $100. Reverend James did a whole welcome committee for you, Hakeem, I see in the back. All right. Reverend Dr. I'm gonna make him that. One of our Central Park 5, exonerated 5, Kerry White, see every Saturday, $100. All right, 50, 50, 50. And I'm not talking about the rapper, I'm talking about $50. Brother Greg, been with us a long time.
David.
Brother David, he's in red and black today. Fanaya, okay, I know I know your name. I thought you'd tell me something else. Sam Taylor, Naya gave him $50. Sam Taylor, $50. Brother Dawsey, one of our real leaders in the LGBTQ committee here at NAM. Brother Minister Carolyn, Brother Mallory, $50. Chaplain Mitchell, Sandra Mitchell, $50. Come on, 20s, 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 20s. Here we take credit cards, just go to the desk. We take everything except Ghetto Express. Now everybody, whatever you got, $1, $5, whatever you have. Thank you. Now, before I have our chair leave, because I'm going to have him leave because I don't, let me tell you something. The reason I have sometime our guests leave is because you cannot come and expect them to answer everything on the spot. Congressman, Chairman, I need you to help me. My landlord bothering me. Well, what's the problem? He bothered me about my rent. Ain't no big thing, I ain't paid the rent 6 months. That's a big thing. He can't handle that. But before he goes, one of the brothers brought this tribute for you, Hakeem. Stand up and let him present this to Congressman Chair Hakeem Jeffries. I'm trying to get you in the papers. Turn around. All right, give him a hand as he leaves. Our chairman, Hakeem Jeffries. What?
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, here we go. Gotta get the shot. Get it, Bill. Get it
All right, let the chairman go. Let's go. All right. Now, I want to, before I dismiss, we're going to have a birthday for our new young member, Kitty. Come on, bring this kid out here. Kitty just reached the birthday. And all you December birthdays, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, where's Kitty? There's Kitty asleep, but we gonna show the pictures when she wake up. Come on, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kitty. Happy birthday. It is 1 year old. Just 1 year old. Happy birthday to you. All right, give her a big hand. Kitty slept through her first birthday party. I'm gonna call our members as they come up. Evelyn Hart.
En route. We're delighted that the president was able to attend our Washington, D.C. breakfast, and Reverend Sharpton is en route here so that we can continue the program. We are actually going to start in the next 3 minutes, and so I would ask if you are looking. Okay, so here's how it goes at the House of Justice. For those of you if this is your first time, we are a faith-based movement founded upon the principles of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And part of the church tradition or the faith tradition is a call and response, right? So when I say Happy King Day, you're going to respond with the same level of energy with the same statements, all right? Yeah. Happy King Day! Happy King Day! Happy King Day! Good afternoon. afternoon to all of you who are here. We are delighted that you are with us on this afternoon. My name is Katrina Jefferson, and I have the pleasure of serving as a senior liaison to the great Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton, who is en route from our National Action Network Washington, D.C. Bureau breakfast that they have annually, where the president has just finished his remarks. Reverend Sharpton is literally in the air, in transit, and will be here. So we're going to go ahead and kick today's program off with some of our elected officials that are here with us who have taken the time out of their day. Let's first of all give them all a round of applause for being here with us. It's always a challenge when navigating schedules, but we're certainly delighted that all of you who are here to speak about Dr. King's legacy and share what he means to you and how you will incorporate his principles into your work this year and thereon, okay? And so we're going to kick today's program off with none other than the New York State Attorney General, the great, Honorable Tish James.
This is the day that the Lord has made. You may be happy and rise and make some noise for God. Come on. If you love God, make some noise. If you know God, make some noise. You better get on your feet if you've got a relationship with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Dr. King was a man of faith first and foremost, and so you better praise him today, because this is the day. Come on. This is the day that the Lord has made, that the Lord has made. Come on. I will rejoice and be glad in it, and be glad in it. Come on. Come on. I'm going to get the other elected officials involved. Glad in it. Oh, this is the day. This is the day that the Lord has made. Come on, give it up, let's go. You may be seated. We're going to have church in here this morning before Reverend Sharpton joins us, because this is the day that the Lord has made. And it's really critically important that everyone understand that Dr. King was a man of faith first, and that he did not praise elected officials, did not bow to kings and queens, and the only individual that he would bow to is his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Can I get an amen? Amen. Can I get an amen? Amen? First, let me just tell you this. Dr. King did not like a lot of praise. He did not like long speeches. He did not like a lot of adulation. And as I mentioned, he did not bow down to elected officials and or kings or queens. He bowed down to his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And it's also important that individuals understand that when Dr. King died, when Dr. King was killed, when he was murdered, he was marching on behalf of the sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee. And it's important that everyone understand he created access, but it was all about opportunity. And at that time, his dream died. And all of us in here, every elected official and all of you, because all of you are leaders, we've got to reignite that flame, that smoldering flame, and make sure that we continue to march forward, focusing on justice. And we've got to use our voice and our vocation to talk about the issues that individuals care about and that Dr. King would have cared about. The fact is that not far from here, blocks from here, individuals are living in public housing in degradation without heat and hot water. Can I get an amen? Amen. We've got homelessness and individuals struggling from mental illness. Can I get an amen? Amen. We've got poverty rates that are on the rise. Can I get an amen? Amen. And so we've got to use our voice and our vocation to stand up on behalf of Dr. King, because silence, my friend, is a betrayal of Dr. King's message and his legacy. And that's why we've got to use our voice, and all of us must stand together at this point in time and talk about issues that he cared about. And so I say to you, as the elected official, as an Attorney General of the state of New York, I stand on the shoulders of Dr. King, and I will use my voice and my ability to use the law to lift individuals up each and every day as the Attorney General of this great state. Dr. King believed in a pluralistic society, and that's why we've got to join hands with our brothers and sisters of all faiths, of all creeds, of all races, and let them know that we care about humanity, the humanity of others. And we've got to talk about the struggles that individuals are focusing on right now, the struggles that people are going through right now. So as the Attorney General of the state of New York, let us not be in despair. Let us use our voice and talk about hope. The hope that brought us Barack Obama. The hope that's brought us Reverend Warnock, yes, and Mr. Walsall in Atlanta. And the hope that brought us Hakeem Jeffries. That's the hope. That is the hope. That's the hope that we should rest our laurels on, but at the same time continue to challenge others. Because Dr. King would not want elected officials who are only concerned about publicity. He would be more concerned about individuals and elected officials who cared about people. Dr. King would not want elected officials who propagate hate, but he would want elected officials who would talk about hope. Dr. King would not want elected officials who would attempt to separate us and those who are more concerned with celebrity. Dr. King would talk about if he wanted elected officials to push policy and push us forward in progress and not to talk about the path of darkness. So I leave you here, I leave you this evening, this afternoon, again with the message of hope and determination, and knowing that at the time, remember, Dr. King oftentimes spoke alone. He was not beloved back then. He was an enemy of the state. It's important that individuals understand that, but he was a true revolutionary who wanted to bring dramatic change to the lives of others. And each and every one of us must bring change to the lives of those who are locked out of the sunshine of opportunity. That is my message today. Lift people up, hope, provide them with opportunity, and lead forward. God bless you, thank you, and remember, we, all of us, are children of the dream, but more important, we're children of the King. God bless you and thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, from the great borough of Brooklyn, District Attorney Eric Gonzalez.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Brooklyn District Attorney Eric Gonzalez, and I'm honored to join you here at the House of Justice as we celebrate the life of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Today, we lift up all that Dr. King has done for us. We remember his vision, and we remember and we recommit ourselves to making sure that we are part of building a more perfect and equal union. Dr. King reminded all of us that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. However, every day confronts us with stark reminders of the length of that moral arc. Hate crimes have surged in this city as the voices of bigotry have been emboldened by some of our nation's most powerful leaders, and unfortunately, the silence of too many others. Several states have passed laws that prevent public schools from teaching the history of slavery and segregation and Jim Crow. As ugly as that history may be, it must be taught to our children so that we can learn from that era, that we never go backwards. And all of us have seen assaults on voting rights in this country. The rights of women have been reduced in many, many places and states. LGBTQ plus community has been under attack, and democracy itself in state legislatures and actually in our courthouses have been under attack as well. And so this is a difficult time, but fortunately, we've also seen many examples of bravery, of courage, of people who have strong commitments and working tirelessly for a better America, for a fairer America, for a more equal and just nation. And we know that it's up to each of us in this room. It's up to each of you in your work life and your personal life to be part of that progress. New York City has always been on the vanguard of the civil rights movement. Years before the Montgomery bus boycott, the Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Jr. launched the Harlem bus boycott in 1941. My home, Brooklyn, the Brooklyn chapter of, from Brooklyn. The Brooklyn chapter of the Congress for Racial Equity led successful campaigns to integrate our schools. And they challenged discrimination in housing, employment, and education. We have our leader here today. I can't be in the House of Justice without talking about all that Reverend Al Sharpton has done for the cause of civil rights and democracy. And I come from Brooklyn. Ken Thompson, Brooklyn's first black district attorney, brought long overdue reforms to our criminal justice system to make it fairer and more just, and to make sure people who were convicted were actually guilty, and got so many people out of jail who had been wrongfully convicted. And I'm proud to continue that work, keeping Brooklyn safe, building community trust, bringing innovation to this criminal legal system, making sure that in Brooklyn that we stand for what a fair and modern prosecutor's office can accomplish. And I want you to know that we've taken a really self-critical look at our work. We've partnered with organizations to look at racial and ethnic disparities in our criminal legal system. And I want you to know that our work to promote fairness and justice is now guided by data. We use innovative and evidence-based programs to safely give second chances to many of our young people, so we can keep families together and we can hold folks accountable for the things they did wrong, but really give them the tools to be successful and to live law-abiding lives and to reduce recidivism so that we can all be safe. We look at incarceration not as the best first answer, but really as the last resort. At the same time, it's so important for me to tell everyone that your public safety is my highest priority. And we won't ever stop trying to stop gun violence as we focus in on the drivers of crime that are responsible for so many of the shootings in our communities, disproportionately in Black and brown communities. And I'm happy to tell you that the strategy is working in Brooklyn. Since 2020, since the surge of violence in New York City that was caused by the upheaval, by the pandemic, we've worked really hard with community partners and violence interrupters in the New York City Police Department and a lot of elected officials to reduce violence. And if you listen to the paper, you would never actually understand what's been accomplished. In Brooklyn, over the past 2 years, shootings have been reduced by 32%. Homicides have been reduced by 21%. This progress in saving lives is worth celebrating. And I'm sure that we all know that there's a lot more work to do to confront upticks in other crimes. But the narrative, and this is a narrative that I think has been troubling many of us, the narrative that Black leadership and leadership of color is moving the city in the wrong direction is something that we have to confront. We know how to keep our community safe. We're mindful that justice and fairness has to remain the North Star, and that we must always be guided by our values. And so our values require us to remain steadfast in the fight against racial hate and bigotry. Our values obligate us to safeguard the rights of every person, every victim, everyone who's been accused of a crime, to make sure that they're treated with fairness. Our values motivate us to ensure the safety of our neighbors, to keep fighting for equality and fundamental fairness and equal opportunities and true justice for all. Today, as we talk about Dr. King, I'm mindful about many of the migrants who've entered our city, the least of us. and that we have to make sure that we understand and that we don't fall prey to a narrative that's not true. These are folks who came legally, with legal process, who are seeking asylum, and the government will give them their days in court, but we have to make sure that we uplift and provide services, and we understand that it's taxing and it's hard, but we have to make sure that we provide legal status for people who have come here for the same reason that many of our families have come here. We're all the stewards of Dr. King's dream, and our continued progress is on each and every one of us. So today, on Dr. King's birthday, let his legacy continue to inspire all of us to keep working so very hard to bend this arc of the moral universe towards justice. May God bless you. Happy King's Day. Thank you.
All right, now if you're not a stranger here at the House of Justice, you know that pop-ups can happen at any time, and so I'm going to bring up our State Attorney General back up to the microphone to introduce our next speaker, who is no stranger to us here at NAM. Let's give her a hand as she comes.
So Reverend Sharpton, as you know, is a civil rights leader and an icon, not only in New York, but all across this nation. And it's really critically important that all of us understand that we must do things in order, right, and in decency. And Reverend Sharpton said that we should go on with the program. And so I hope you don't mind if we go on with the program. Is that all right? Yeah. All right. So the next individual I have the opportunity to introduce to all of you hails from, is Brooklyn in the house? Brooklyn. Okay. Okay. I got the mic. But he belongs to all of us. He belongs to all of us. Someone who has been fighting in Washington, D.C. for voting rights. Someone who has been fighting for diversity in the courts. Someone who's been fighting for economic opportunity. Someone who has been using his platform and his voice to advance the lives of all of us here in the great state of New York. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you none other than the majority leader of the United States Senate, Charles Schumer!
Thank you, everybody. And I love Queens. And I love Manhattan. And I love Staten Island. I love the Bronx. I love all of New York. But I am the first senator from Brooklyn ever. All right. It's great to be here. And first, I do want to say to my good friend, Reverend Sharpton, what borough is he from? I forgot. And thank him for his great fight for racial justice and societal justice. I want to thank NAM and the House of Justice for always holding this great event. And friends, it is a special day. And when you think about this, we know that Dr. King is a man whose words and deeds accomplished nothing less than elevating the human race. How many people can you say about in the whole world? Hardly anybody. And folks, it's not a coincidence. Think of this. There's only one day on the calendar named for one man. We have lots of holidays. We have Father's Day for all the fathers, and Mother's Day for the mothers, and Veterans Day for the veterans, and President's Day for the presidents. But only one holiday for one man, and that is Mlk Day. And why is that? Because Dr. King was singular. No one else came around like him and hasn't. He is exceptional, he is unique. And let me tell you a story. When I was a young congressman, I was one of the people fighting to make MLK a national holiday. And you wouldn't believe the bigotry thrown at us, even by some members of Congress, when we tried to do it. But remembering how Dr. King never gave up, we persisted and persisted and persisted, and we are now all celebrating MLK as a national holiday. What did Dr. King do? So many things, but the way I like to look at it is, he hoisted a giant and heavy mirror on his shoulders. And with his eloquence, with his faith, with his brilliance, he forced America to look into that mirror, and America didn't like what it saw. It saw an ugly picture of racism and bigotry and treating people horribly. And that began the long march that we're still on towards equality. He made our nation a better place, just as he made every one of us a better person, and set us on a path to trying to make America a more perfect union by ending the bigotry and racism in the country. But even as we keep our eyes on the obstacles that remain on the path to racial justice, we should take stock of the hard-won progress we made. That's what Dr. King would want us to do. He'd want us both to keep fighting for the future, but revel in our accomplishments of the past. So let me just say a couple of good things. First, I am thankful that Democrats retained and expanded our majority in the Senate, and it was done by electing Reverend Raphael Warnock to the United States Senate in Georgia, and he is the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, Martin Luther King's pulpit. I'm also honored that the voters of New York elected me to another term. I'm the first senator to have been elected to 5 terms in the Senate. And the other thing I'm grateful for in this election, with all the attacks on our democracy, you've all seen what they did, that the American people rejected much of the hard right extremism of Trump and some of those leaders in this election, and defeated so many of them who ran for office. And in the omnibus bill that we just passed, we did a lot of good things. We raised Pell Grants by $500. We raised child care funding by 30%, so needed. But one of the things I'm proudest of that I fought for, along with our Attorney General, wherever she went, you know what the Bible says, compliments paid when someone's not there are greater than compliments when they're there. In any case, as you know, one of the greatest scourges in America is the racial disparity in maternal and birth health. It is unbelievable that women of color suffer far greater rates of mortality, and their children do, regardless of income. So there's something called the Momnibus to correct that. And in this omnibus bill, we passed some of the provisions of the Momnibus, including, for the first time, a full year of postpartum coverage for mothers on Medicaid and on CHIP. That is a BFD. We did other things. We passed the Electoral College Act, first gun safety bill in 30 years, Violence Against Women Act, Emmett Till anti-lynching, helped veterans, but most of all, we put in 100 highly qualified judges, lifetime appointments on the bench, and wait, ladies, 3/4 of those new judges are women. 2/3 are people of color. The bench is beginning to look like America under my leadership, including the appointment of Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first black woman, and not only the first black woman, but the first public defender to sit on the Supreme Court. There's not only racial diversity, but we have diversity occupational. So the first time, instead of just partners in big fancy law firms, almost all white males, we have put in public defenders, immigration lawyers, consumer advocates, and that's going to change America for the better. So folks, that's what we can accomplish when we remember Dr. King importuning us to fight. We should take his example. Never give up. He found such strength in the scripture. The prophet Amos echoed in his ears. Amos said, "But let justice run down like water, and righteousness like a mighty stream." We are going to keep doing that. We are going to keep fighting. We are not going to give up till we achieve Dr. King's dream of an America that is equal, that America that is fair, and America that's devoid of victory. Thank you, and let us God bless great Dr. King and his memory. It's great to be here with all of you.
The great Senator Chuck Schumer. All right, no stranger. All right.
If you don't think Brooklyn matters.
Next up will be our House Democratic leader, none other than the great Hakeem Jeffries.
Good afternoon, man. Happy King Day. What an honor and a privilege to be here at the House of Justice with so many distinguished leaders, and of course, Leader Schumer and all those who have already spoken, those who will speak after me, and of course, I've got to give honor to the angel of this house, the leader of the National Action Network. I know he's on his way, none other than the great Reverend Al Sharpton. Aren't we thankful for him? All that he's done for the community, the city, and the country. Al Sharpton is a civil rights champion, a defender of the disenfranchised, a voice for the voiceless, and a powerful, profound, principled, purposeful preacher. Don't worry, y'all, I won't go through the whole alphabet, but we're thankful for all that Reverend Sharpton has done. For decades, laboring in the vineyards of our community. Now, over the years, I've had the opportunity to be here at the House of Justice, to be here on King Day. First, as just a young lawyer, pardon man, then as a member of the New York State Assembly. I've been here as a candidate for Congress. Last 5 terms, I've been able to be up here at the House of Justice as a member of the United States Congress. I'm honored to be with you here today as the highest ranking Democrat in the United States House of Representatives. But God, and all of us who are here today, we stand on the shoulders of giants. Stand on the shoulders of giants like Dr. King and Rosa Parks, Fannie Lou Hamer, Shirley Chisholm, Adam Clayton Powell, Charlie Rangel, John Lewis, Thurgood Marshall. We stand on the shoulders of giants, those who have paved the way, knocked down barriers, made progress in society. And so we're thankful for the life and the legacy and the leadership of Dr. King and the lessons of his journey. So much that we can draw from Dr. King's life story, but I would just point out that if you think about what Dr. King was able to accomplish in moving America forward, along with all of those civil rights heroes and foot soldiers, they were able to do more with less. Can I talk to y'all for a moment? Yes. More with less. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have email. They didn't have Facebook. Didn't have Twitter. Didn't have Instagram. Didn't even have TikTok, y'all. They were able to do more with less because they believed in each other. They believed in the goodness of the American people. They believed and had faith. Y'all know faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. We walk by faith, not by sight. If you just have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can move. We've come this far by faith. They were able to do more with less because they had faith in each other, faith in Almighty God. And so we're thankful for that, and as a result, they were able to come together, move the country forward, pass and see over the finish line the 1964 Civil Rights Act, 1965 Voting Rights Act, 1968 Fair Housing Act, Medicare, Medicaid, Head Start, the Elementary and Secondary School Act, the Higher Education Act, the Immigration Reform Act. They were able to do all that and so much more. Civil rights movement, great society, because they had faith in God, faith in each other, faith in the goodness of the American people to move this country forward. They couldn't even have imagined all of the position that we now have, all of the firsts that exist in DA's offices, U.S. attorney's offices, the attorney general, legislative positions at the city council level in Albany. Couldn't have imagined all of the position. They helped us attain it, and now it's on all of us to answer the question, what will we do with this opportunity? What will we do to meet the challenges of the moment, learning from the life, the legacy, the leadership, the lessons of Dr. King? And we've got some challenges, y'all, folks who don't like the progress that was made. Folks who want to turn back the clock. Haters running all across the land. Wickedness in high places. Folks who want to embrace the theoretical ministry of Martin Luther King Jr., but not his good works. Celebrate him, but not elevate the work that he did. Some folks who even they go to church and they pray on Sunday. But then they come to Washington, D.C., and they pray, P-R-E-Y, pray on the American people. Go to church and pray on Sunday, and then come to Washington, D.C., and pray on the American people. Pray on the poor, pray on the sick, pray on the afflicted, pray on the least, the lost, and the left behind. Go to church and pray on Sunday. Come to Washington and pray on the American people the rest of the week. Want to try and take away your Social Security, take away your health care, take away your Medicare, take away your affordable housing, take away your reproductive freedom, take away your voting rights, but here's the news flash, we're not going to let it happen. Not now, not ever. In the spirit of Dr. King. And so we're just going to continue to build upon his great work and fight in Washington as my colleagues are fighting for you here at home and in Albany. Fight together for racial justice, fight for economic justice, fight for social justice, defend democracy, fight for freedom, protect the public interest, ensure economic opportunity in every single zip code, and we're going to do everything that we can to finally get the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Act over the finish line so we can end the era of voter suppression in America once and for all and continue our great country's long, necessary, and majestic march toward a more perfect union. God bless you, God bless Nan, God bless Dr. King, and God bless the United States of America. Happy King Day.
All right, representing the 13th Congressional District in the Great Borough of Manhattan, or on, and since we are an island, U.S. Representative Adriano Espillat.
They have me up right after Reverend Jeffries. That's, in my neighborhood, they call that a setup. But it's a pleasure to be here at the House of Justice. I know the Reverend is on his way. The Reverend has been a steadfast advocate and voice for all neighborhoods, in English and in Spanish, by the way. And it is a special day that we celebrate here today. And often we come here and we hear, of course, about the greatness and goodness of the great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And we hear about the theory of the lamb, the tiger and the lamb, right? And yes, you know, he was a humble man, and yes, he was a peaceful man, and yes, you know, he was one that preached nonviolent resistance, but he was also a tough guy. You had to be tough to endure the fire hoses and the dogs. You had to be tough to take on Bull Connors and find yourself behind bars. You had to be tough to face the treachery of those days that far too often is even present today. And so he fought so we could have this tapestry of leadership. He fought for us to have, Mama Dukes, a seat at the table. Because you all know what they say, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu and you get eaten for lunch. And so he fought for us to have an African-American female speaker. He fought for us to have an African-American DA in the Boogie Down Bronx. He fought for us to have a Supreme Court Justice, Sonia Sotomayor. She fought for that too. And some of our detractors may choose on a given day to advance their wicked agenda to call that identity politics. They call it identity politics because we want to have the diversity that's seen here in this stage that Martin Luther King fought for. It's identity politics when it doesn't pertain to them. When it pertains to them, they call it empowerment. And so Martin Luther King fought for diversity and to get us a seat at the table to ensure that your voices, there's nothing more important than having one of your sons or daughter have the ability to come to the table so they could speak for you. That's irreplaceable. Now, politics is not a tailor-made suit. I can't fit into the suits that I had 20 years ago. Politics is not a tailor-made suit. I don't have to totally agree with the person, but we must fight to give them a seat at the table. And Martin Luther King fought for that. And we must continue all to fight for that, to ensure that the diversity that we have here, a lieutenant governor by the name of Antonio Ramon Delgado, is one of us. That's progress, right? And so let's continue to fight together. I remember when Reverend Sharpton went up to Washington Heights the day they killed Kiko Garcia. You know, many people didn't know that he was there. Many people may not even understood what he said because they couldn't speak English. But they felt that he was there giving them some support. And so let's work together. We don't got to push somebody down to come up. We could all come up together. All ships may be able to rise at the same time if there is the right time. And so I'm here once again, as I come every year on more than one occasion, to share this moment with the Nan family. Because this is a family. Right? And they come from all walks of life. You know, you may have a banker sitting next to an organizer here. That organizer may be organizing against the banker right next to him. They all find themselves here on a common struggle that was originated by the great late Martin Luther King. Now, I have the privilege, and I'll end with this, I have the privilege of representing a district that was represented by 2 members of Congress in 75 years. By the line of Lenox Avenue, Charles B. Rangel, and by the king of the cats, none other than the great Adam Clayton Powell Jr. And if you have the opportunity today, just Google his name and Google that speech that he made. What's in your hand? What's in your hand?
the power of the vote that's in your hand. It can shape society. It can move mountains. It can make you cross the Red Sea. What's in your hand? Make sure you Google that and you see it today. And I thank you. Thanks for supporting Reverend Sharpton. Thanks for being part of the Nan family. God bless you and keep the faith.
All right, Reverend Sharpton has landed in New York and is en route to the Great House of Justice, so we're going to continue with today's program. Yes. Just a quick announcement. There is someone that is double parked, and we certainly don't want you to get towed. The license plate, New York State license plate is EXS3935. Again, that license plate number is E as in Edward, XS3935 from the state of New York. If that is you, you're double parked, please move your vehicle or it will be towed at your own expense. All right, I have the great pleasure of introducing our next speaker, who is not only the speaker of the New York City Council, but she is also my dear Spelman sister. And I see another one of our Spelman sisters in the house, Starla Miles, here with us as well. And so let's give her a hand as she comes, New York City Council Speaker, none other than Adrienne Adams.
Oh, good afternoon, Nan family. Thank you, Spelman sister. Katrina, it is great, as always, to be here with you in our House of Justice. I want to thank Reverend Sharpton and the National Action Network, of which y'all know I'm a lifetime member, right? Just saying. I thank you all for hosting this annual celebration of Dr. King's life and legacy. I also want to acknowledge the wonderful Mother Gwen Carr. We revere you and love you. As well as all of my colleagues in government, particularly my city council members, Councilmember Crystal Hudson, Councilmember Shekhar Krishnan, Councilmember Tiffany Caban. I don't know if anyone else came up from our, Councilmember Kevin Riley. I got the Shekhar. Councilmember Althea Stevens just walked in also, so we have quite a few of the members here. I am so blessed. Councilmember Gail Brewer. Oh, hi Gail. We are all so blessed to be here with you and to serve you. And again, I stand here as the first Black Speaker of the New York City Council. But I also stand on the shoulders of giants who have come before me. I would not be here today without the work and the progress achieved by leaders of the civil rights movement, and Dr. King, as we know, was our great giant among them. Although I was born and raised in Queens is in the house today. My parents hailed from South Carolina, and I grew up in the heart of the civil rights movement. And like so many others, I was directly inspired by Dr. King's passion and struggle for justice. I would not be here today without the work of Dr. King and countless others in the movement. His mission and purpose to fight for justice and equality, lift up marginalized communities, and advance our collective liberation rests within me. Every single day, I'm focused on carrying Dr. King's message forward. But though we've made progress, our work is not yet done, as we know. And here in New York City, neighborhoods across the 5 boroughs are facing the same struggles of underinvestment and disparities in access to resources. I know this because I represent communities in Southeast Queens that have been historically overlooked and left behind. Generations of residents have not received what they have always deserved in order to thrive. That's why, as Speaker of the City Council, I've been laser focused on equity, addressing historic wrongs. We confronted in our council persistent racial disparities in maternal health, that impacts Black women and birthing people. We took action to address historic discrimination and lack of diversity in the FDNY by recruitment and retention policies to support women of color and people of color as firefighters. And we've worked to remove barriers for crime victims to support their recovery from violence and in cycles of trauma. Reverend Sharpton wanted us to talk a little bit about policy today, so I'm bragging about ours in the council today. Women lead differently. And as public safety chair of the council last session, I put forth several unprecedented reforms in the NYPD, including the nation's first bill on qualified immunity. That came from your city council. The council has made tremendous strides, but we have more work to do. Yes. Our city must continue to address the historic injustice of underinvestment in Black, brown, and low-income communities. It's our duty and responsibility to ensure that all New Yorkers are healthy, safe, and have equitable access to opportunities. That is our collective vision for New York City, and we can achieve that by investing in communities and meeting the needs of our people. In difficult challenges and hardships, we must double down on supporting people who are hurting the most. That's the same vision that Dr. King advanced in his struggle for racial and economic justice. And as we celebrate his legacy today, it is incumbent upon us to help make that a reality for everyone. Listen, Nan family, I don't know about you, but I don't feel no ways tired. No ways tired. I know that he brought us this far to keep us going. And he did not bring us this far to leave us. I don't feel no ways tired today. I'm going to continue the struggle for justice and equality for the people of the city of New York with my historic council, who make up the most diverse body that a New York City Council has ever seen. I don't feel no ways tired today. I stand in the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and now in the persona of the Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton. I don't feel no ways tired today. And so as we continue to move on, I want you to remember to follow Black women. I have a pin on today that says, follow Black women. Black women gave birth to little boys and little girls. Black women gave birth to men and women. Black women gave birth to a nation. Now Black women gave birth to this world. Follow Black women. And if you follow Black women, like our Senator Cordell Clear, who hosts us today in Harlem, you can go no wrong. We will steer you in no bad place. Follow Black women, man family. We are the ones and the nurturers that are making your legislation look differently than it ever has before. You must follow Black women. And when you follow Black women, you're going to find yourselves in the paths of our righteousness for his name's sake. You got to follow Black women. And when you follow Black women, you know that you're not going to be led astray because your mama didn't lead you astray. Your grandmama didn't lead you astray. Your auntie didn't lead you astray. Your sister is not going to lead you astray. And you know what? I am your sister. Follow Black women. God bless you. Happy King's Day.
All right. Reverend Sharpton brings his greetings. He is en route, and we'll be bringing the governor and the mayor, and we'll hear from all the electeds that are here as well. And so we want to make sure everybody stays put as he is very fastly getting here to be with us. Next up, the Lieutenant Governor of the great state of New York, none other than Antonio Delgado.
Good afternoon. Speaker Adams, I have no problem, my sister, following Black women, especially your incredible excellence and leadership. Thank you so much. I want to thank, thank you, brother. I want to thank, I'm 6'4", I got a little height. I want to thank Reverend Al Sharpton for the opportunity to be with the Nan family today. I want to thank all the electeds, all the public servants, all the advocates, all the folks out there who are here because you care about the community. Earlier this morning, I was in Albany. I marched with the mayor, Mayor Sheehan, and a number of members in the community there, as I used to do when I was growing up in Schenectady with my family, both my immediate family, my mother and my father and my little brother, but also my church family, Macedonia Baptist Church. Yeah. Let us not forget, first and foremost, before Dr. King was an activist, he was a man of faith, and he was rooted in that faith. And I remember growing up in my church, and I've shared this with you before, for those who have been here with me. I was in church a lot, there's no question about it. I was there every Sunday, every Saturday for choir rehearsal. I was there on Wednesdays for Bible study. I was there a lot. Vacation Bible study over the summer, you name it, I was there. But I have a memory that I sort of find myself going back to every once in a while when I'm trying to find my way and stay on course. I was a little boy, 8, 9 years old, marching with my church on the way to the Empire State Plaza. And back then, that march was epic. You had hundreds, if not thousands of people walking up along the streets all the way to the Empire State Plaza. It was cold that day. I was standing next to my brother, holding my coat tight, but holding the sign, Macedonia Baptist Church, representing. And we walked all the way to the plaza, and when we got into that building, all you saw was a sea of people singing in harmony. You felt love, and you felt compassion, you felt understanding, you felt hope, and you felt a togetherness that to this day I can still feel emanating in the room. Now, when I was a little boy, I didn't quite understand what it was, what that warmth was that I was feeling. I just knew I felt it. It made me feel strong. It made me feel empowered. It made me feel like I can do all things, whatever, with this power. Turns out, after reflection, that power was a deep, unabiding, unconditional love. And that's what I want to speak a little bit about today. Yes, policy discussions and how we get there and political discourse and the debates, they matter, but how we have these debates, what they are anchored in, matters more. We can't have just outcomes if the manner in which we are having these conversations are deeply flawed, if we can't come from a place of love. So when I think about Dr. King's legacy and what he really stood for above all else, he was a man who understood and who was certain in the power of love. He was certain in it. And you don't have to take my word for it. He told us that. Every chance he got, he told us about the power of love. You know what? You might say, well, where's the proof? Show me the actions he took that demonstrate non-violence, as he put it, his words, is absolute commitment to the way of love. Non-violence is an absolute commitment to the way of love. His words, love is not emotional bosh. It is not empty sentimentalism. It is the active outpouring of one's whole being into the being of another. The active outpouring of one's whole being into the being of another. That's love. That's power. How else do you stand on that Evan Pettus Bridge and look eye to eye with evil? Look eye to eye with hate? Look eye to eye with spit on your face? How do you do that without believing unflinchingly, radically, unwaveringly in the power of love? So when we think about the legacy of Dr. King, and we think about what we're trying to lift up in today's climate, a climate that is all too divisive, all too violent, all too extreme, I think it's incumbent upon each and every one of us to tap into this power, to meditate on this power, to be present in this power. Don't let the noise get in the way. We saw what that power can do. We saw the changes that it could make. Laws on the books done away with. Segregation overcome. Now there's more work to do, no question about it, but don't forget how we got here. Don't forget that. It's incumbent upon every single one of us. A strong and demanding love. We tap into this power, anything is possible. How we communicate from a place of empathy, compassion, understanding, honesty, decency, with respect for one another can move mountains. You know,
Take your time, take your time.
I'm just tired of the noise. We need truth, people. Okay? We need truth. We need to tap in to our better angels. We need moral leadership. We need it. Dr. King has been my North Star for as long as I can remember. I felt his power before I even understood the magnitude of his legacy. As that little 8-year-old boy, I felt his power before I even understood the magnitude of his legacy. And now to be here as your Lieutenant Governor, I'm just gonna leave you with one of my favorite quotes from Dr. King. And I think this just sums up. You know, it's important to always remember, they say preach the gospel often, but when necessary, use words. You get that? That means live it, right? That means be it. Don't just talk about it. Be it. Be it. Dr. King. Oceans of history are made turbulent by the ever-rising tides of hate. History is cluttered with the wreckage of nations and individuals that pursued this self-defeating path of hate. He continues, love, I said love, is the ultimate force that makes for the saving choice of life and good against the damning choice of death and evil. He continues, and this is my favorite line, therefore, the first hope in our inventory must be the hope that love is going to have the last word. Please, people, please, let's make sure in his name to lift up his legacy that love has the last word. Thank you.
I'm not 6'4". All right, just a couple more minutes and we'll continue the program. I tried. Okay, coming up to the microphone next to bring his remarks, the 45th Comptroller of the great city of New York, none other than Brad Lander.
I don't know why they gotta remind I'm the 45th comptroller. I'm just saying. Good afternoon, National Action Network. It is powerful to stand here in the House of Justice with some remarkable civil rights leaders. When Reverend Sharpton's here, there are powerful leaders in the room, but when he's not here, there are also powerful civil rights leaders in the room. Gwen Card, it's so good to see you and the strength you bring to the movement. We got any folks from the NAN Youth Huddle? I want to give a shout out to the NAN Youth Huddle for the next generation of civil rights leadership. I want to talk to you today about a picture. Some of you have probably seen this picture. It's a picture of Dr. King at Selma, and 2 people away from him is Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. And so you'll understand it's a picture that in the Jewish community it circulates a lot. And actually I was thinking, you may not know this, but the second lady of New York, the wife of Antonio Delgado, is black and Jewish. So that struggle is important to us. But here's the thing. Rabbi Heschel's daughter, Susanna, was asked about that picture. And she was said, does that picture make you feel proud? Can the Jewish community take pride in that picture? And she said, that picture is not about pride. That picture is a challenge. That picture is a provocation. Rabbi Heschel said of that day, I felt my legs were praying. And when you engage in prayer, you don't take a picture and pin it up on your wall and pass it around like it's some kind of racial justice get out of jail free card, or some sign that there's a bond between the Jewish community and the black community that can't be broken, or that we've already done our racial justice work and that we pass a picture around. My legs are praying means you get out there on the picket line, you fight for justice. And I was thinking about this most recently when I was out on the line with those nurses who were striking just a few blocks from here at Mount Sinai and at Montefiore Hospital. Overwhelmingly women, many black and brown, demanding justice and fair pay and fair treatment. And it's not just workers, just nurses, delivery drivers, deliveristas, baristas, college workers, journalists have been out on the picket line fighting for justice. And I was reminded that, of course, that's where Dr. King was on the trip that he made to Memphis before he died. He was out fighting for workers as well. And he said to them, you are demanding that this city will respect the dignity of labor. So often we overlook the work and the significance of those who are not in professional jobs, those who are not in the so-called big jobs. But let me say to you tonight that whenever you are engaged in work that serves humanity or that is for the building of humanity, it has dignity and it has worth. Dr. King said that the fight against economic injustice was the inseparable twin of the fight against racial injustice, and was not just fighting for a strong labor movement, but for an economic bill of rights, that everyone would have health care and housing, a universal basic income, a guaranteed job at a good wage. So praying with our feet, it means fighting every day to achieve that dream. And that's the perspective that I try to bring to the New York City Comptroller's Office, because you know that if we're holding $235 billion on behalf of nurses and teachers and school crossing guards and secretaries and firefighters, that they expect that those dollars are invested to confront economic injustice and generate the kind of equality and living wage jobs that Dr. King demanded. And that's why we're bringing shareholder resolutions against companies that are not doing right by their workers, whether that's Amazon or Starbucks or Apple. That's why we've demanded that all the S&P 100 companies disclose their equal opportunity statements, so you can really see whether they're promoting women and people of color up the ranks of their company. Just 3 years ago, only 14 of the S&P 100 did it. Today, it's 98, and obviously we're not stopping until it gets to 100. But I also want to be honest with you, and I think this is what's critical, because Dr. King and Rabbi Heschel, they knew when you're out praying with your feet, you are fighting societal injustice, but you better also be working on your own shortcomings. So, here in the House of Justice, where Reverend Sharpton has frequently pushed us, both the Comptroller of the State and I, to look at how that money's being managed, I have to be honest with you, because for the first time this year, we put the numbers out about our minority and women-owned business managers of that $235 billion, and it was not pretty. James Baldwin said, not everything that's faced can be changed, but nothing is changed until it's faced. That's why we put those numbers out, and that's why I have to stand here and tell you today that only 11.65% of that $235 billion is being managed by women or people of color, and a much lower percentage of that by black investment managers, even though they are some of the very best in the business. So I tell you today though I will not only be, and I know we can do better, because I asked about our public finance desk, and we contracted with MWBE firms for 30% of our bond underwriting. That gap between 11% and 30% and even higher, that's what I'm going to come back and talk to you about next year and the year after and the year after, not just out on the picket line with those workers, not just fighting for workers' rights more fiercely, but holding myself and ourselves accountable to that vision and that dream of racial and economic justice. To conclude, the last time that Rabbi Heschel and Dr. King saw each other was at a protest of the Vietnam War in 1967. And they had both been advised not to protest the war by people who said, why are you going to go out and do that? You're going to just make people angry. This isn't your core struggle. But they both said, you know, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And they were out there fighting against the Vietnam War. And I got to tell you, if they were alive today, they, of course, would be continuing the fight for racial and economic injustice, but they'd be taking on some brave and bold fights as well. I bet you Rabbi Heschel would be the loudest in support of the freedom and dignity of Palestinians. Yeah, is that right? And I know that both of them would be demanding that we welcome refugees from all over the world, from Ukraine and Afghanistan, from Africa, and you better believe those who have walked across half a continent from Central and South America. There is room in this city. We will, with the help from Albany and Washington, find the resources to provide shelter and services because, as Dr. King said, we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality tied in a single garment of destiny. That's what that photograph is about. Like Micah 6:8 says, to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. Thank you so much, House of Justice. It's a blessing to be with you. Enjoy your King Day.
All right, from the boogie down results none other than the District Attorney Darcel Clark.
Thank you so much. Is the Bronx in the house? Is the Bronx in the house? All right, thank you. Thank you so much. I want to thank Reverend Al Sharpton and Nan for always providing this space for us to have these conversations that are so important to our city and to our nation. I want to thank you all for being here to celebrate the life and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You know, yesterday was January 15th, would have been his 94th birthday, okay? And we got to thank God for him being born in order to be the leader that he was and also to leave behind the legacy that he did. And this April 4th is going to be the 55th year that we lost him in Memphis, Tennessee, as he stood there fighting for sanitation workers. And then this August will be the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington and the I Have a Dream speech. So it is so important that we continue to celebrate his life and legacy. Yes, I am the Bronx District Attorney, and I stand on the shoulders of a Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and a Reverend Al Sharpton and a Mother Hazel Dukes. I stand on their shoulders, and I would not be the first woman DA in the Bronx and the first black woman elected DA in the state of New York, but for the work of those giants. So I thank them each and every day. And I know if Dr. King were still alive today, that he would be in the space and the waters that I swim in every day, which is called criminal justice. I am in the justice business. This is the house of justice. And we have to know what justice looks like and how we get justice done. And as district attorney, I want you to know that I fight each and every day to make sure that we have public safety and fairness every day. That is what community justice is. That is what criminal justice is. To have safety and and fairness at the same time. And as the district attorney for the last 8 years, I have built a reputation, I hope, of making sure that I deliver that to the people of the Bronx each and every day. I wake up every day and go to sleep every night thinking about those 1.5 million people that I represent, and that is my job to keep them safe. So when I do my job, I'm gonna do it in a full spectrum. I'm gonna use my pulpit to let you know that the Bronx needs help. We are tired of being the first in everything bad and last in everything good. And I'm working so hard to change that narrative. And the way we change that is to make sure, and these leaders here, all of these leaders here can help us, but you can help us as well, to make sure that we bring the resources that we need to the Bronx. People end up in the criminal justice system not because they want to. You think people want to come into the criminal justice system? You think they want to face jail and prison? No. What leads them there is poverty and the lack of stable housing and poor schools and the lack of programming for our young people and mental illness and substance use disorder. That's what we experience in the Bronx. We need the money to go into those things to keep them from coming to see me in the criminal justice system. And that's what I want the investment to be in. So I could be the last resort and not the first resort in order to solve those society ills. So that's what I do every day. You know what, this past week, I did two things on two sides of the spectrum of the job of district attorney. First, I am going to be unapologetic about being the district attorney, about being a prosecutor, okay? Because somebody has to make sure that our community remains safe. So I'm going to do all that I can to hold those people responsible and hold them accountable. That's going to bring that death and devastation to our community. So you know what? On Friday, I stood with Junior Guzman's mother and we closed the book on the Junior case. 13 individuals now who killed that 15-year-old boy. Gang violence that killed that 15-year-old boy. We closed the book on them. They are now being held accountable for what they did to him. And I will stand up for him and anybody else who is the victim of that kind of crime. I will not apologize for standing up for victims of crime. I will not do that. But at the same time, I also will not apologize for giving a second chance to those people in our community that deserve it. I will not apologize for that either. And last week, I did that in another way. I started 3 years ago with the Osborne Association. We worked hard to come up with an alternative to gun violence in our community. I started what's called the Bronx Osborne Gun Accountability and Prevention Program. And what that program is we're taking first-time gun offenders, people who face a mandatory minimum of 3.5 years in prison and giving them a second chance. A lot of prosecutors won't do it. My colleagues here in the prosecutor's office have done it. Alvin Bragg and Eric Gonzalez and Melinda Katz is here. We're not afraid of taking chances on the people in our community that deserve it. So a 12-month program that gives them anti-violence counseling, trauma counseling, mental health, job awareness and training, education. We are doing that for those young black and brown people who for the first time pick up a gun, not because they wanted to, some of them thought they had to. Because they're afraid in their community. They think they need it for protection. Or they saw their mother or their father or their brother or their sister shot down in the same community and feel that they don't have any other way. We are giving them alternatives to violence. And so therefore, we started this 12-month program. And instead of those individuals facing that 3.5 years in state prison or the 2 years in prison that I was offering to people who were first-time gun offenders, they now are going home without a felony record. Some of them became fathers during the program. And some of them used the very skills that they learned in our program to de-escalate violence in their very community. So they're home now, and they're getting a second chance. And 9 black and brown young men are getting a second chance because I had the faith in believing in them and doing that kind of work for the people in our community. That's community justice. That's public safety, and that's fairness at the same time. So I learned from Dr. King, and I'm going to continue to have the faith because he was a man of faith, and that is what he has taught me. So I'm pursuing justice with integrity in the Bronx, and that means doing the right thing. Even if nobody's looking, I'm going to make sure that I do the right thing on behalf of the people of the Bronx. I've done it for the last 8 years, and I hope in this November I'll get to do it for another 4 years. But I'm not afraid to do the work that needs to be done. Dr. King said you have to have faith. That means taking the first step, even if you don't see the whole staircase. I'm willing to do that on behalf of all the people of the Bronx. So I thank you for your love, your support, and most importantly for your prayers and the leadership of these great giants that's in here. I see the Honorable Charlie Rango here now, the Lion of Lenox Avenue. These are the shoulders that I stand on, and I'm so happy to do it each and every day on behalf of the people of the Bronx. So God bless you, and happy Dr. King Day.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, stand to your feet. None other than the Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton.
No justice. No peace. No justice. No peace. No justice. No peace. No justice. No peace. What do we want? Justice. What do we want? Justice. What do we want? Justice. When do we want it? Now. When do we want it? Now. When do we want it? Now. Fist bump the person next to you. Tell them you love them. Let me first thank Katrina Jefferson for presiding. And all of our elected officials that have come. National Action Network has an annual breakfast in Washington. And this morning, Martin Luther King III and his family joined us, and our keynote speaker was President Joe Biden. And I was teasing the president that since he spoke at Ebenezer yesterday, he thinks he's a preacher now. He preached too long for me to get back on time. But let me say, and I will have more to say, let me welcome now, as we continue our speakers, our next speaker here for King Day at the House of Justice. She's been here before. She's here again. The governor of the state of New York, Governor Kathy Hochul. The governor told me, she said, I know you were with the president, but you live in New York. Get home and introduce me.
True story, Reverend Al, true story. He knows how much New York loves him, and this is the right place, but we know you left the president. We know you left a national celebration to honor the life of Dr. King, but you came back to New York, and we love you for that. So yes, we are here in the House of Justice. Yes, we are. But what is justice other than a word if we don't act upon it every single day? That is what we are called to do. That's how you live the legacy of Dr. King. It's not just to get together and high five and say Happy King Day, make us feel good and then move on with our lives. How do you live the lessons, the teachings, the inspiration of Dr. King every single day? And that's what we're called upon to do. Dr. King has been an influence in my life since I was a child. You're saying, how is that so? Yes, I'm old enough to remember him when he was still alive. I read a book called Childhood of Famous Americans. My parents wanted to make sure I read it because they were civil rights warriors in a conservative part of our state where it was not the most popular thing to be doing was to be fighting for civil rights and going to the marches and dragging your little kids along. But I read the story of Dr. King, and I reread it. I did a book report on it, and he was still alive, and I listened to his speeches. And the night we learned of his assassination, I'll never forget. Our family, all of us raised in a social justice Catholic family, held hands and prayed and wept. Because what would happen to our country without this conscience of America, who called us to be better than we were at that time in our history? But I've never lost that. That's what drew me to public service, and knowing that with leaders from the local level that I'm joined with here today, our state level, our federal level, we all have a moral obligation to take the torch that Dr. King left and gave it to us and make it glow even brighter. And that's why, as a governor, I can make sure that we focus on the issues that reflect our belief in justice. Because right now, it's an injustice that too many people don't have a good roof over their head, that they're living on our streets, that they're suffering from mental illness, that their kids don't have a good education, they can't find childcare to have a good job. That to me is an injustice, and I will not stand for injustice. And I also believe that we can do so much more to bring diversity to places of power, like our courts, the highest court in the state. I believe in the rights of people to live their dreams just as Dr. King wanted us to do. And I will stand here with the power that's been given to me by all of you, the people of this community that had your faith in me and stood up and said, we're with her. You've empowered me to be the voice of the people that Dr. King wants us to keep fighting for. That is my pledge to all of you. It's not just a day. It is a lifetime commitment to ensuring that we don't prejudge people by the color of their skin or by their positions or their cases. That we give people an opportunity to be heard. Because that's what living justice is all about. And I'll go to my grave knowing that I will fight the good fights. I will stand shoulder to shoulder with the people up here on behalf of our people, starting with Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton and Mama Hazel Dukes, who I see every day of the week, whose story lifts us all up. To all of you here, our leaders, community activists, and the true believers in the dream, we will not let this dream become a nightmare for fellow New Yorkers. We'll stand up and fight for them every single day. That is my pledge to you. God bless every one of you. Thank you. A really long proclamation, single space, lots of words. Anybody who'd like me to read this before I present it to Reverend Al, you just raise your hands. I'm not seeing a lot of hands go up right now. Okay, I respect the will of the people. Reverend Al, this honors Dr. King here in the state of New York. I will hand it off to you right now, sir. You.
Thank you. I'm not sure the applause was for the proclamation or because you didn't read the proclamation. Let me say that it is important that we realize, and you that have seen the documentary on my work, Loudmouth, that we've got work in the North as much as we do in the South. And the lack of justice and fairness in the North is just as egregious as in the South. Too long we've acted like racism stopped at the borders of Alabama and Mississippi. That's why I'm glad they did this documentary. The fact is that we have seen the same kind of racism in the North. And we have confronted it, and we've got to continue to confront it together. And we need to stop the infighting with each other. When I look at some of us, you know, the way they had us fighting each other in slavery, light skin against dark skin, like you decided who was going to be what complexion. A lot of that was a result of intermingling. Now they fight West Indian against Southern born. Puerto Rican against Dominican. We need to stop this mess. None of us had ancestors made a reservation on an ocean liner to get here. We were kidnapped and dragged here. But we built here and we ain't going nowhere, and we gonna run here together. A couple of weeks ago, we had a summit here of the top black officials, from the lieutenant governor to the mayor to the state attorney general who was here, to the speaker of the New York State Assembly, to the speaker of the state senate, and to our public advocate who's here, and our three of our district attorneys. One that, for reasons that they have to deal with protocol, could not attend, but that has been committed and open to working for justice. When it comes to gun violence and civil rights, we talked and we're working together, and I'm happy. He is a historic appointment. In fact, the guy just left appointed him with the nomination of the guy that just left here. May I bring you the leader of the Southern District, the U.S. Attorney, first black to be the U.S. Attorney in Southern District, U.S. Attorney Damian Williams.
Thank you, Reverend Sharpton, for inviting me here today to celebrate Dr. King. So today is a good day to reflect on the principles that Dr. King preached to America. When I say preach, I don't mean just the gospel, because Dr. King, as we all know, was also an evangelist for a different kind of religion here in America, a civic religion. Dr. King examined our founding documents and discovered the principles that we were promised but were not provided. Principles like universal freedom, universal equality, hope, happiness. Dr. King told us that those things can only be achieved through persistence and peaceful struggle. The kind of struggle that leads to what he called the beloved community, right? A place without hunger or hatred, a place of redemption, a place of reconciliation. And all those years later, 55 years after an act of hate struck him down at 39 years old, those principles are still true and timeless. But let's not get it twisted. You know and I know that just because something is true doesn't mean that it will ultimately triumph in the end. And Dr. King knew that too. I mean, this was a man who was filled with boundless optimism for America and hope for America. And yet at the same time, at the very same time, could be brutally honest about his shortcomings. This was a man who stood at the foot of Lincoln in the city of Washington, in the teeth of Jim Crow, the era of Bull Connor and the Billy Club. And despite all of that, still declared that he refused to believe that the Bank of Justice was bankrupt in America, and that a better future was within our grasp if we were willing to work for it. Yes. Dr. King is what people call a seer, a man with prophetic vision, a man who could see two horizons at the same time. The old horizon behind us, a road that began with tears of pain from our ancestors, and the new horizon in front of us, a road that, God willing, ends with the tears of joy of our descendants. Now, all of us have a role to play in making our way toward that new horizon. I'm trying to do my part as a U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York. I am as determined as ever to make civil rights enforcement core to what we do in the Justice Department. ensure that the people of this district can enjoy freedoms in all the different forms. Freedom from racial discrimination, freedom from religious discrimination, freedom from hate crimes, which are far too high, freedom from wrongful convictions, freedom from predatory landlords, freedom from unsafe working conditions, freedom from unconstitutional and unsafe prison conditions, freedom in all its forms, freedom from environmental injustice, and yes, freedom from gun violence, because safety is a civil right too. It's the freedom to be safe, and you deserve that. And so I promise you this, I will use all my power as long as I am U.S. Attorney to work for those freedoms, to be guided by Dr. King's prophetic vision, to work every single day to prove that Dr. King was right when he said that the bank of justice in this country was not bankrupt, and to work day by day, step by step, with all of you in this district to move towards that new horizon. Thank you everybody for having me. Appreciate it.
Give him another hand. I was not the only one that did some traveling. We have our next speaker traveled from a little further back than I did, but he's home for King Day. And may I bring you straight from El Paso, Texas, the mayor of the city of New York, Mayor Eric Adams.
Thank you, and acknowledgement to Dr. King's Day. I was in Tulsa, actually, I was in Texas, and on my way back on the plane, I saw an amazing documentary I really think we all should see. It's a documentary that was done on Sidney Poitier. And the director was Oprah Winfrey. She remembered during the time when she was a little girl, she used to watch the documentary, and I remember the scene in the documentary. She talked about, as many of us who are old enough to recall, she talked about whenever a black folks was on TV, everybody used to run and say, "Black people on TV." And we used to watch. You know, if it was Julia, if it was Porgy and Bess, it didn't matter. Oh my God. But it showed the journey of Sidney Poitier, who was born poor. He did not even know what racism was, because where he was born and we was raised in Nassau, there were just so many black folks around that when he came to Florida and was introduced to racism in the Klan, it was just unbelievable. And he couldn't read. He had a problem reading. But he touched Oprah so much, and he inspired her because of the roles he played. He would only play roles that were dignified roles. He would not play a role, he wouldn't be step and fetch it, he wouldn't be anything that was comical. He always played these roles. And then during the height of his campaign, of his career, there was an article that was written in the New York Times that basically stated that he's not black enough. And they basically set the tone that black folks felt he wasn't black enough. And Oprah tells the story of her 42nd birthday that Quincy Jones held for her. And she walked inside the room and turned the corner. And who was standing there? Sidney Poitier. And she said tears rolled down her eyes, and she spoke with him, and he sat her in the corner. Because at the time, Oprah was going through she's not black enough. And Sidney said to her, you cannot carry the dreams of others on your shoulders. You must live your life and your dream. And it's so significant in this moment. Because if you were to do an analysis of black and brown folks who stood in the line of fire, you will find this unique sentence, they're not black enough. I cannot tell you how many times, if it was a knife in his chest, or standing up and being incarcerated for fighting on behalf of the people in Puerto Rico, fighting on behalf of people who were going through tragic moments, that there were those who were detached spectators, sat on the bleachers and watched people like Reverend Sharpton on the full battle of life, and then want to critique what he is and what he is not. And so as we acknowledge the physical transition of Dr. King, some of us want to have a retrospective appreciation, but let's be honest with ourselves. Just like Sharpton, Dr. King had a letter opener stuck in his chest because someone thought he was not black enough. Right. And if you would read the articles back then, not the ones now, not the clean up version of saying how much he was this great civil rights leader, but go read the articles back then and how all of them demonized Dr. King and did not understand the real mission that he was putting forward and what he was fighting for. So we can talk about the greatness of who he was, but how do we treat him when he was there? And what are we doing to our Dr. Kings of today?
Come on now.
How we, I think about when I was running for office, all the years I put on fighting abuse and policing, when I became a candidate, I wasn't black enough. It is mind-boggling to me.
Say so.
There hasn't been a man in the history of this city that has done more to prevent our young people being in a sense of violence. What we're doing around child care, dyslexia screening, earn income tax credit, partner with our crisis management team. And then you hear some of the ancestors who attacked King are now adults attacking me. I'm not black enough. But let me tell you something.
Say so.
I didn't hear it from Sidney Poitier, but I heard it from Oprah Winfrey. I cannot carry the dreams of others on my shoulders. I know my purpose and my mission. And my purpose and my mission is to say to the black and brown people who are running this most important city in the most important country, this is our opportunity to uplift the things we fought for years. The real reflection on Dr. King is what are we going to do with the power we have now? Person of color is the borough president in the Bronx. Person of color is the borough president in Queens. Public advocate, person of color. Hakeem Jeffries, person of color. Leader of the Senate, person of color. Leader of the Assembly, person of color. Leader of the City Council, person of color. President, person, borough presidents, the mayor, person of color. Heads of major committees are people of color. So the real celebration of Dr. King is to say, this is what he marched for, this is what our ancestors fought for, this is what we put our lives on the line for, this is the moment that they all asked for. So now the question is, what are we going to do with that moment, and how do we uplift the people in the process? And so, I don't walk around with a dashiki. I don't have enough hair on my head to have an afro. But when you do an analysis of my office, and you start to see that my first deputy mayor, person of color, my chief of staff, person of color, my chief advisor, person of color. You go into my agencies and you see the first Korean that has ever been a commissioner. You see the first person that's a Muslim that has been a commissioner of a major agency. When you see the diversity, 5 women are now deputy mayors in the city of New York after being locked out for so many years. When you see what we are doing, we are not yelling and screaming or saying who we are. We're living who we are. That's the Dr. King moment that I know. Let's not be distracted. This is such a significant moment for us all. And I'm going to focus and not be distracted on this moment. And I thank all of my DAs, DA in the Bronx, person of color, DA in Manhattan, person of color, DA in Brooklyn, person of color. I don't know what city they used to call it, but now they need to call New York. This is Chocolate City. Now quote that. And we don't have to leave anyone behind. That's why, King Sunshine, we are fighting with our Jewish brothers and sisters to deal with anti-Semitism in the city. That's why we are connecting with Grace Ming and the AAPI community and Assemblywoman Raj Kumar to deal with what is happening with our brothers and sisters from the AAPI community. That's why we are connecting with people who are a part of the migrant and asylum seekers. I don't even know the madness of people telling me I shouldn't go speak to my fellow mayor in El Paso to deal with a crisis that the national government is supposed to be dealing with. Stop running for office and do the office you got now. So on Dr. King's Day, we are not just going to think about the dream. We are going to live the dream. And we're going to move our city and the country in the direction of where the dream is supposed to take us. Thank you so much. Thank you, Reverend Dr.
Eric Adams. And let me tell you this, Mr. Mayor, before you go. As you know, I started at 13 as youth director for Dr. King's organization in New York the year he died. It was not popular to be in his organization in New York. The Black Power advocates would attack him. And the day after he got killed, they invited me to the Martin Luther King Memorial. And they started every year during King Day when they denounced him when he was alive. Just like Eric Adams and I know some guys, Cordell, I knew a guy that was for the overthrow of the U.S. government. You could tell people to vote, I want to see the government overthrown. And 15 years later, he came in here and said he needed my help. I said, what's your problem? He said, they messing with my Social Security check. I said, I thought you wanted the government overthrown. A lot of folk talk black, but some of us got to do black. And you can attack Eric all you want. People talk about I'm loyal to Eric. I'm loyal to who's been loyal to us. It is true. It is true that we as an organization have access to the White House. The president was at our event this morning. I got a TV show. But don't ever forget, when you talk about people like Eric, I'm from Brownsville. I never ran and I never will. Thank you. Let me bring on the district attorney of the borough of Manhattan. Harlem, live right about 3-4 blocks from here. Alvin Grant.
Thank you, Reverend. I was joking with my colleagues in the back. You know, we've heard from Brooklyn and Queens and the Bronx. Is Harlem in here? All right, just so we know where we are. So look, I come to you prayerfully this afternoon, and you know, I often start with scripture, and Dr. King was a Baptist preacher. So it is only fitting to start with scripture. And as I look at Dr. Dukes, Ms. Carr, our chairman, Congressman Rangel, and of course, Reverend Sharpton, I think of Galatians 6:9, which says, grow not weary of doing good works. There's so many in here who've been fighting for so long for all the things we've been talking about. Dr. Dukes and Congressman Rangel have been fighting since before I was alive. So please, can we clap for them? I draw so much inspiration and strength from the work that they do and the rights they fought for. So what does that mean for your district attorney? And our U.S. attorney said it earlier. Our first civil right is our safety, our ability to walk to our corner store and get some juice and milk and come back home safely. That is our first civil right. As Reverend Sharpton said, I grew up not too far from here, and I grew up not too far from here ducking from gun bullets. So that's our first civil right. And I want to submit to you first and foremost, as we fight for gun safety, and our shootings and our homicides are down citywide, they're down even further in Manhattan. But I want to, yeah, let's clap for that too, yes, thank you. And we got there in part by focusing on the drivers of violence, the very small number of people who are driving the violence. So we're going to continue to do that. But there is a racial justice issue here. 97% of the victims of shooting violence in New York City in 2021, the last year we have data, Black and Latino. 97%. That is a stunning, eye-popping statistic, even for someone who grew up on these streets. And it's sad and it's tragic. So we have to continue to do that work. That is our number one and our first civil right. And we're focusing on that, driving those numbers down, and also looking at the trauma that causes our community. We formed a group in the DA's office this past year called our Witness Aid Services Men of Color Group. Counselors and clinicians talking to the Black and Latino men, predominantly men who've been victims of gun violence, working with them to help them through the trauma, and by extension to help us through our communal trauma. So we're going to continue to address that work, hold people accountable, but also help to heal our communities. Beyond gun violence and the traditional issues that we talk about when we talk about public safety, I want to talk about the broader issues. And again, I'm called to think about scripture because it's Dr. King Day, and I'm a Sunday school teacher as well. So we go to the Gospel of Matthew where it says, I asked, and I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I was sick, and you took care of me. So what does that have to do, you may ask, with public safety? Everything. Everything. That is our social, yes, everything. That is our social service blanket. And at the district attorney's office, we're focusing not just on accountability and bringing cases, but we're on the front side of the ledger too. So just this past year in 2022, we started a housing protection unit. We are pursuing landlords who are harassing tenants out of their homes. We've got a case against 6 developers who took your hard-earned tax dollars and were supposed to develop affordable housing, but instead are charging high rates, breaking the law, we allege. We're expanding our worker protection unit, right? We know it's hard out here. And if you work an honest day's work, you should not be paid a criminally low wage. So we're expanding our worker protection. And I had the benefit of standing with many of my colleagues. We know it's been tough coming out of the pandemic with our collective mental health. We announced a $9 million initiative to invest in our communities, invest in prevention to shore up the holes in our mental health. And I'll end with this one, which has special resonance in this hall. I know we have my senator here, Cordell Clear, and she's been fighting for exonerations since I was, not before I was born, but since I was a young boy. And so the other thing that we've done this year is focus on that. Late last year, we vacated 188 convictions that arose out of misconduct by police officers. So we're going to continue to do the work to drive down shootings and homicides, but we're also going to continue to work side by side with many of you. We're going to work together, we're going to pray together, and we're going to grow not weary doing the good work. God bless you there.
All right, no stranger to the House of Justice is none other than the New York City Public Advocate, the great brother from Brooklyn, Jamani Williams.
Peace and blessings, love and light, everybody. How you doing? Happy MLK Jr. Day. So today we get to celebrate the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And everybody, almost everybody, will be lifting his name. Many of them will be pretending they would have been walking with him even though they don't want to do his work today. So there'll be a lot of people lifting up his name, but they don't want to fight for racial injustice or inequity today. There are many people who are going to lift up his name, but when it comes to economic justice, they don't want to fight that fight either. So what I'm saying is if we are going to lift up his name, then we have to do his work. And there are words that somehow we've allowed people to adopt and to pervert, and we have made become dirty words. A word like progressivism somehow has become a dirty word, but Dr. King was a progressive. And unlike the word Republican, progressive means the same today as it did before. There's a word like, and this is where I gotta hide, democratic socialism. I gotta duck on the democratic socialism one. That's a dirty word, but Dr. King was a democratic socialist. That's what he was pushing. When did these things become dirty words? These were the things that we were fighting for equity and justice. So if we are going to lift the man up, let's lift up his work, because we are still fighting for so many other things today that we were fighting for many, many years ago. This city is probably as segregated as it was 40, 50 years ago right now. Do you know that Dr. King, when he died, was one of the most hated men in America? His negativity polls were low even in the black community. We have to be clear about that. Let's do this in context because we have a lot of work to do. So I'm very happy that we get to celebrate a man and his greatness, but I want to make sure we celebrate his work and that greatness too. Because there's a lot of work that's left to be done. And as is mentioned, there's so much melanated power right now. I'm not sure if Dr. King could have imagined or dreamed that melanated power. But I do know what he understood is that the answers to the issues of politics wasn't simply swapping out white folks for melanated folks that was going to do the same thing. I also know that he knew that the answers to the problems of American capitalism were not simply having black capitalism. I'm sorry, sometimes I lose folks, I don't lose anybody. The answers are to put people in those places that are going to be as radical and revolutionary as him, so we can bring everybody along, not just a few that are lucky to be in the front. So the question is, what did Dr. King do today, and what am I doing? So when it comes to issues of people dying in gun violence, which they are, is that a symptom, or is that the issue? Do we have to fight to stop that symptom from occurring as we occur, dealing with housing, mental health, dealing with lack of school, all that stuff is no excuse, but if we address those issues like Dr. King wanted to do, that gun violence will melt away. What would Dr. King say today to the asylum seekers that are coming to our city? Would he use it as an opportunity to divide us? Would he make it up so that it's either long-term New Yorkers or new and aspiring New Yorkers, or would he say it's all New Yorkers? Because he knew we had to fight against anti-black racism. I want to be clear when I say anti-black racism, because that's in its own bucket, and we have to address that. And it's still alive today. But he would say that we can't let anybody suffer injustice. We can't let anybody suffer oppression. We have what we need. When you hear me saying, people say we have to make sure our wealthy pay their fair share, Dr. King said that. I stand here because of the dreams that he had, but do you know that he said he wondered if he segregated into a burning house? He wondered if his dream turned into a nightmare? So we can't sit and allow people to sanitize the memory of Dr. King. And we try to say, oh, it was the peaceful one, and then we had our brother Malcolm X. They killed both of them. Because it wasn't how they were saying what they were saying, it's because they were saying it at all. So Dr. King just wanted peace, I want to share something really quick. If peace means a willingness to be exploited economically, dominated politically, humiliated and segregated, I don't want peace. If peace means being complacently adjusted to a deadening status quo, I don't want peace. If peace means keeping my mouth shut in the midst of injustice and evil, I don't want it. Peace is not simply the absence of conflict, but the existence of justice for all people. That ain't me, that was Dr. King. You know the man you celebrating, the man you lifting up, celebrate all of him. Because we are in a space right now where we have tremendous wealth, tremendous access to power. What are we doing with it? And by the way, melanated people don't get 2 chances. We only get 1 shot. We got to get it right. We got to bring everybody along with us. Everybody. America has never lived up to its full potential. America has never lived up to what it said it was on paper. But I'm very proud to be part of the America that has tried to make it do so. That man, Dr. King, risked his life. To all of us who have titles, we can risk at least that. We can at least risk our titles. We can risk our stature. And I'm talking to myself because I'm not holy and now. I'm in this game. So I'm talking to myself as well. But there are people who are counting on us. Just because a few black folks have made it doesn't mean black folks have made it. Just because a few Latinx people have made it doesn't mean Latinx men have made it. Let's ask ourselves, what would Dr. King do? What would Jesus, peace be unto his name, who Dr. King worshipped and followed, what would they do? And are we doing that? And I don't think we are right now. But we have an opportunity to do it. So when we go to next Dr. King Day, let's say what we did this past year that really lifts him up. It's easy to say his name, it's hard to do his work. Y'all still with me? I'm so proud to be in the House of Justice. And I need to make sure everybody understands, I don't care whoever tries to say it's not true. The Reverend Al Sharpton is a continuation of the civil rights work that Martin Luther King Jr. was doing. I'm so happy to be with my colleagues. I'm so happy to be with everybody. Are y'all still with me since I lose? Just because you're wealthy doesn't mean bad. But we know, we got to talk about this stuff. I wouldn't mind being wealthy too, I got to tell you that. But we got to pay our fair share if that's what it is. People need to be housed. People need food, good food. People need an education. Our folks need these things. How can we be dealing with the same things for 40, 50 years? We've been screaming jobs and justice. If you're going to lift up his name, lift up his work, I don't say nothing at all. Peace and blessings, love and light to you all. Thank you.
All right. Reverend Sharpton will be back with us momentarily. He just stepped to the back to wrap up his radio show. So we wanted to let everybody know, hang tight. We still got a Power Pack program to continue with. Just a quick announcement also, our youth huddle immediately following today's program will be holding a prayer vigil at the King statue that is on 146th Street. They will be meeting in the back of the auditorium and going over to the statue immediately following today's program. Coming up from the borough of Queens, our very own District Attorney Melinda Katz.
Let's hear it from Ms. Katrina. She's got the hardest job in the house. Ms. Katrina, Mr. Derek, Madam Carr, Mama Duke, who I see so often in Queens County. I swear she's running for borough president. So I want to thank her. So, you know, I was afraid I was going to have to speak after Mayor Adams. And I was going to say, I'll watch anything Sidney Poitier's in. I think that is an amazing story he tells. I want to thank Public Advocate Williams and just everybody that's here. You know, I am the District Attorney of Queens County. There's Queens in the house, I just want to know. Not as much as the Bronx, come on. So, in Queens, you know, I have 2 little kids. They are now 11 and 14. And God has blessed me at the age of 57 years old with an 11-year-old. I am going to be a grandmother when I am 125. But hopefully God blesses me long enough to see their wedding and their college days. And as many of you know, because I talk every year about, you know, we talk at dinner about holidays and individuals that are in the news. And they're of the age now where we talked about Martin Luther King last night. And at the discussion was, as it always is, Mom, aren't you going into private practice at one point? We're tired of you leaving at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. And I brought up Dr. King. And I said, look at Dr. King. He went to college. He had a PhD. He had a church. He had a family. And he chose to take the civil life, the civic life, and make a difference for generations that he will never meet. And generations of people that he is calling for equality and fairness. And I will tell you, in Queens County, we have accountability. I heard so many folks today talk about accountability. I also listened to Adrienne Espaillat talk about having a seat at the table. As Shirley Chisholm said, if you don't have a seat at the table, then you should bring a folding chair, because you have to get a seat at the table. But accountability means if you buy guns in Alabama, and you buy guns in Georgia, and you bring them up the iron pipeline, and you sell them to our children, you will be held accountable in the borough of Queens County, and you will pay for those crimes. But you can't let the next generation pick up those same guns. You have to educate. You need mentorship programs. Martin Luther King was very clear in saying, darkness doesn't get rid of darkness, only light will do that. And that's why in Queens County we have diversion programs for guns. We have courts like mental health courts. We have veterans courts for those that paid the price of mental illness for fighting for our country and who are suffering from PTSD right now. We have courts in Queens County that help to make sure they get the help they need, to make sure they don't end up back in the courtroom. And most importantly, we have youth funding to make sure that young people never see the inside of a courtroom to begin with, because that's the safest I can make my borough of Queens County. So, I am proud to be here in the House of Justice. I want to thank Reverend Sharpton. I want to thank all the leadership. I want to thank everyone here for coming out year after year. On behalf of the people of Queens County, God bless you. Thank you.
All right. New York State, he doesn't know that I'm bringing him up because we just changed the order. Comptroller, none other than our very own Tom DiNapoli.
You can do better than that. He handles the money.
Thank you, Reverend L. Thank you, Reverend Sharpton. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here once again at the House of Justice. I know many of us have had a number of events today. It's great to see the turn of the elected officials. Special shout out to the Bronx Borough President, who hosted a wonderful celebration this morning at Union Grove Missionary Baptist Church. Vanessa, good to start the day with you and to end the day with you as well. You know, I am old enough to have remembered Dr. King when he was alive. I certainly remember that very sad day in April when he was assassinated, standing there for the workers, for the sanitation workers. And I think it's so important that today we celebrate his life and we celebrate the enduring legacy of his vision for all of us. I have to say, as a kid growing up on Long Island, part of my awakening was following Dr. King's words and his life. Part of my awakening is when a number of people a bit older than me took an interest in my being involved in the community. I was blessed to have met Hazel Dukes when I was a teenager. And Hazel Dukes said, because we lived in the same neighborhood, I know the city claims her now, but we still claim her on Long Island. She said, Tom, you got to get involved and you got to step it up. Hazel Dukes helped me get elected to the Board of Education out there on Long Island at age 18. Age 18. Thank you, Hazel. Thank you. You know, so many important words of Dr. King's that I know many of us have been referring to. I'll just paraphrase one of them. You know, he said, progress is not inevitable. It only happens when there is the work of individuals who serve as co-workers to God. And I think that's an important message for us all to keep in mind, that there's still a great deal of work for us to do, and that progress is not guaranteed. We made a lot of progress in our city, in our state, and in our nation. But we have to be honest with the fact that the progress was not complete, and the progress took several steps backward the past couple of years with the impact of COVID-19, the impact on health, particularly in Black and brown communities. The inequities that were there before were laid bare, and even more severe in terms of the impact of the pandemic. Gun violence only got worse. We know the incidents of racism, anti-Black, anti-Semitism, anti-Asian hate only got worse with all the pressure and all the uncertainty and all the difficulties of the past few years. So what we need to do in government is continue to shine a spotlight and be honest with the fact that that progress certainly is not inevitable, and we have a lot more work to do. In addition to looking at the money, what we do in the Comptroller's Office is look at the trends that are happening in our state. We put out a report in December that showed that, stark numbers, 14% of New Yorkers all across New York State still living in poverty, one of the highest percentage rates of any state in this nation. And the poverty rate is twice as high for Blacks and Hispanics as it is for whites. And the counties with the highest poverty rates in our state, the Bronx, Manhattan, Brooklyn, shows that there's much more work to do. Home ownership rates, 33% Black versus white home ownership. That's where we talk about how wealth is built up through ownership. So from my perspective, we need to do more with the data we collect in our office to paint a full picture about what's happening in all of our communities. We have more reports coming out on food insecurity, on housing affordability, and we are seeking in ways that we can with the power of our office, as Reverend Sharpton said, because we do have something to do with the money, trying to move the money in a direction that addresses these issues. So I have to leave it to the governor and the legislature to make decisions on budget priorities, but we're going to continue to shine a spotlight on the needs that are out there and hope that that informs a more thoughtful discussion. With the money that we do control, and I appreciate Reverend Sharpton's support and encouragement in this area, we are continuing to empower more Black and brown, Hispanic, Asian firms who manage our pension money. We are giving more money to those managers that have been closed out of the system for many years. And you know what? Give these managers an opportunity, and you know what it shows? Diversity is not only a sensible idea, it helps your bottom line. It's good business sense. When you have more people that look like our entire community, you are empowering people to make a difference. And so many of the firms of color are newer, younger, hungry, exposed to niche markets that we've been closed out from in the past. So I'm very proud of the fact that our pension fund in New York State, we now have $31 billion under management by women-owned, Black-owned, Hispanic-owned, Asian-owned, Latin-owned firms. It's made a big difference. And for those of you who are interested, on February 17th, we are having yet again our MWBE conference, Emerging Manager Conference in Albany. It's part of Black and Puerto Rican Caucus Weekend, because we are making clear the doors of opportunity are open with how we manage our pension fund dollars. That's how we secure that benefit. But we're also a shareholder with the companies we invest in, and we've made it a priority to hold companies accountable. You know, one of the big issues is the leadership in corporate America. It tends not to look like America, right? The population in the US now is about 40% minority. Yet, when you look at those running the corporations, boards of directors, only about 12% individuals of color, only about 4% Black, only about 1.5% Black women. We have a lot of work to do in making sure the leadership of our companies and corporate America looks like America. So we have a new policy now. We started this a couple of years ago with lack of women on boards, but you know, frankly, in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder, we said we have to do much more on racial equity. Now, when we see a slate of a board of directors of a corporation being presented to us as a shareholder, if there are no racial minorities on that slate of board of directors, we vote no. And we press the companies to make sure there are more Black and brown people running these companies. And you know what else? We're concerned about how corporations are treating their employees. Amazon's become a big part of all of our lives, hasn't it? And yet they've had a very poor reputation out there with how their black and brown workers, particularly their warehouse workers, are being treated. So we introduced a shareholder resolution calling for Amazon to do an independent racial equity audit so they could look at themselves independently and see how they're treating their workforce. They resisted that shareholder proposal, and we lost it on the first vote, but we got 44% of the vote of other shareholders. And you know what? It brought Amazon to the table. And they agreed that we reached an agreement because we were going to file another racial equity audit shareholder resolution. And they said, okay, we'll do it. And they have hired Loretta Lynch, the former Attorney General under Barack Obama, to head that independent racial equity audit. And we expect those results to come out shortly. And we filed similar shareholder resolutions at other corporations. We're going to continue to do what we can because corporate America must be part of the change. Government cannot do it alone. Corporate America must be part of the work that we need to do. So let me just say that we have an agenda that's very much focused on the work that we do. We're pressing the banks that have had some big issues about discrimination in their lending practices. We have a whole agenda that is refocused on the issue of racial equity. If there is anything positive to come out of that terrible tragedy of George Floyd's murder, it certainly got us to be reminded that we all need to do much more work. Let me just close. I will read one quote from Dr. King, and I'll end it there. Hazel will remember I read this at my inauguration last week when you were kind enough to speak there. This is part of what he said when he accepted the Nobel Peace Prize. When our days become dreary with low hovering clouds and our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, we will know that we are living in the creative turmoil of a genuine civilization struggling to be born. I read that quote at my inauguration last week because it may sound like a pessimistic view, this notion that there's a darkness, there are clouds hovering, but I think it's Dr. King's notion that if there's a time of struggle, and even though it may seem like things are not always going in the direction that we'd like them to go in fact, this is part of the process. This is part of the struggle. This is part of the engagement that we all have to have with each other to make sure that all of us can live with dignity and respect, with safety, with success. So I know in some ways I get frustrated like we all do that we're not further along, but this is part of that process for us to have a genuine civilization here in New York City, in New York State, in the United States of America. Let's keep Dr. King's dream alive. Let's work harder, harder, harder to make it a possibility. And I'm very proud to stand with Reverend Sharpton and Nan in that struggle for us to achieve that genuine civilization. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
State Controller Tom DiNapoli. Let us hear from a brother beloved that we've known who has served and has dealt with one of the most critical aspects of our city and our community. He is now the Chancellor of the New York City school system, the Honorable David Banks.
Good afternoon, family. Certainly my pleasure to be here. By show of hands, how many children are in the audience? Keep your hands up. How many of you have children? Hands up. How many of you were a child at some point in time? That should cover most of the room, I would hope. You know, my father taught me that there are three kinds of people in the world. Folks who make stuff happen. That's who Dr. King was. That's who Reverend Sharpton is, and so many of the people who are here on the stage, and others. Then there are folks who just watch stuff happen. There are a whole lot of them. There are a lot more of them. And then there are folks who just kind of wake up every day and say, hey, what happened? Our community can't afford to have so many people who just wake up every day and say what happened. Or folks who just stand on the sidelines watching what happens. We have to be much more proactive. And when I think about our school system and the work that we have cut out for us to begin to change what's happening in our school system, so that we are producing young people who are change agents. Young people are going to come out here and make stuff happen. That's the reason why we should be sending them to school in the first place. And so we're going to be working very hard to do that. I'm just mindful of, Dr. King. We know him for so many great speeches. But there was one speech that he gave in 1967 in Philadelphia at Barrett Junior High School. He spoke to a group of junior high school students. And he left them with just 3 things that he said. And what I want to tell you, the first one he said is that as a young person, you must have a deep and abiding belief in your own dignity, self-worth, and somebodyness. That sense of purpose that you know that you are somebody. We have to affirm that. And for so many of our young people, they don't have that sense because they don't know who they are. And so we've been working really hard, and as we go into the next school year in September, we will be rolling out a Black history curriculum that will be taught to every student in our New York City public schools. Absolutely. Far too many of our young people don't know who they are, and we haven't done a good enough job of teaching them, and then we blame them when they get it wrong. And so I didn't come here today to talk rhetorically. I wanted to tell you some very specific things that we are in fact doing. And so that is one thing. The other thing I will tell you that Dr. King said to young people in Philadelphia was that endeavor to be excellent. Think about that. He said you ought to burn the midnight oil. You ought to study. You ought to be striving to be the best. Remember when we were raised like that? When we were told we had to be twice as good? And so many of our young people today are moving as though mediocrity is their destiny. And that's not the way that we should be moving. That's not the way that this administration is moving. 25 years ago, the New York City public schools changed the way in which young people were even taught how to read. And they got it terribly wrong. 65% of Black and brown children in our schools today in New York City are not reading on grade level. That is criminal. That is criminal. And so we are going back to teaching young people through phonics, the phonetic approach to the teaching of reading, a very basic approach, because we're going to make sure that by the time this administration is done, there won't be one young person that's not on grade level. By the time they're in the 3rd grade, they must be on grade level. Because if they're not, you're fighting an uphill battle on everything else that you're trying to achieve. You cannot have excellence if young people don't know how to read. And so we're going to ensure that we have that. And the final thing I want to tell you is that Dr. King said that we ought to be committed to the eternal principles of beauty, love, and justice. We have to give our young people a purpose for why they go to school in the first place. And that's one of the reasons why we committed to what we call career pathways. We're going to ensure that whether you go to college or you don't go to college, you're going to come out of school with the credentials that you need to go to college. And if you decide not to go to college, you're going to have the certifications, you're going to have the licensing, you're going to have all the things that you need that you can step right into the world of work. This 21st century economy is very different than when we went to school. And we have to spend our time and our taxpayer dollars ensuring that young people have all that they need so that when they get out of school, they can get off mommy and daddy's payroll. Say amen, somebody. Amen. So that's what we're focused on. That's what we're going to be driving. We do it in the spirit of Dr. King. I do it in the spirit, and I will tell you, of Reverend Sharpton, who is a living, breathing a page of American history for so many of us and so many of our young people. And so I'm so happy to be here. Dr. King said, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, keep on moving. Keep on moving, people. Love you. God bless you.
Chancellor David Banks, talking about living history. There's none that is more a giant in our history, that has done more longer and stronger. Nobody did it longer and better than the Lion of Lenox Avenue, Congressman Charlie Rangel.
Wow. This year I'll be 93 years old. And believe me, I can't think of a better place to get this old battery recharged than being here today. It's the old sunshine here with Mother Dukes, who beats me every place I want to go. She's there. I want to thank Londell Davis and Assemblyman Betty Dickens for getting me over here. It takes a little longer than before. But when I was a kid, I went to school on Lenox Avenue. At that time, not 35th, and Lenox was PS 89. And my mother, she had gone there before me. And it seems like whenever somebody mistreated you, there was a saying that they had then, and sometimes you hear it now, when someone is angry with you, you say, so what you gonna do about it? What you gonna do about it? I had no idea that this country could produce white people that could hate us so much that they're prepared to tear down the Capitol and say they'd rather have no government than fair government. And this is done when Commissioner Banks talked about education. If you take a look at the history books and see how the Germans killed 6 million white people, if you believe that the white folks in Germany who were Catholic and Christian and read their rosaries and read the Bible didn't know about it, you got another guess coming. When you can condition to mind to believe that they are better and pass that on for generations, and then along come people like Dr. King and say that he's anxious to make it equal, and he's going to take away this false sense of superiority, you got to fight on your hands. That's the reason why Sharpton was stabbed. Not because he looked so sharp with these clothes that I don't know where they fell off the truck, that's what we used to say. But the whole idea that somebody can stand up to all of these people and say enough will cause a whole lot of people, when Trump calls them, they come from under the rocks and say, not on my watch. The question that people are asking is, what you gonna do about it? I have to admit that being born and raised in Harlem, you can call it Chocolate City if you want. But white folks were no threat to us because they always collected rent and smiling, so I never thought for 1 minute that there was hatred out there. I was in combat, and there's no question I got medals for killing people that I have no idea how God allowed me to do it. But I never really saw the hatred until Percy Sutton and David Dinkins and I went south in the 60s, and people looked at us and they were ready to get hurt to kill us. And would you believe there was a little overweight boy from Brooklyn? And he was talking about God made him do it. Well, I was active, but I never thought I would see the day where there would be a sign in Washington, D.C., where I served for 46 years, and the sign said, National Action Network, said NAN. And who was speaking? The President of these United States of America. That kid from Brooklyn was able to become what Reverend King said, what you gonna do about it? He started at an early age saying that he was ready to march, go to jail, and do what had to be done to let them know that we were not willing to tolerate the injustices that would happen. And Reverend Sharpton has had the power of success for so long that wherever you go in these United States, if there's a hopeless, jobless black person that has been abused and feels that there's nothing that they can do about it, when someone says, so what you gonna do about it? White cops in the South have been so used to abusing and taking black folks' life that they never, ever thought that a white jury would ever do anything about it. But today, all they have to do is say, I know somebody who knows Reverend Sharpton, and the whole atmosphere changes. And so, we can't all be a Lloyd Dickens, as the Summerman's father was. We all can't be Percy Sutton, Basil Patterson, Dave Dixon, and certainly not Dr. King. But there is something that each one of us has. Just a little bit of Hazel Dukes. Just a little bit when they ask you, so what you gonna do about it? That we've had enough examples today to last us a lifetime to know that one, just by coming here, God has exposed you and taken the veil off your eyes to let you know that you can do something. And when you have the whole world giving you respect and acknowledging that you may be able to do something about it, believe me, how easy it is for them to adjust their entire personalities. So thank you for giving me, a guy born and raised on the streets of Harlem. When I said I was going to go to law school, I don't know any of the boys that were laugh and say, sure you will. But I tell you that when I marched with Dr. King from Selma to Montgomery, they asked me to come down there to take a picture, not to march. I had bad feet before I went on. I got bad feet today. And so, when they said the crowd was moving, I was moving too, toward a taxi or something, because I had a round trip ticket. But I did not know in Selma they had no sidewalks. And before I knew it, I was in the bushes, no TV, no lights, marching, and I cussed every step of the 54 miles went, what the hell was I doing in Selma, Alabama? It was only after that that I truly understood, when they said, what you gonna do about it, that I could say, I can do this much as all of us can. Thank you for giving me a chance to do mine. And Reverend Sharpton, I don't know how I treated you when you were a kid, you know. And I don't know what lies people talk about when they said I didn't give you the respect that some kid from Brooklyn deserved, but to be honest with you, I know nothing about no Brooklyn, you know? But you have really been the epitome of hope and dreams and fulfillment of those dreams. And today, for you to be there, listening, where the president is listening to you, I know Martin Luther King is smiling, saying, you're doing something right.
You gotta go, man. You can't come in front of the cameras. Yeah, you can't.
All right. She's a senator hailing from the 30th district, which covers parts of Harlem, includes portions of East Harlem, the Upper West Side, Morningside Heights, Hamilton Heights, and beyond. Let's give a round of applause for our very own, none other than the Honorable Cordell Clear. Happy Martin Luther King Day, everybody. So much has been said already. I'm new in the New York State Senate, but I'm not new to the struggle. I'm not new to the fight for justice, and this is the house of justice that we're standing in today. You know, something that we always say, no justice, no peace. We heard Reverend Sharpton say that when he came in, and I looked at some of the works of Dr. King, and he knew it then. He said, true peace is not merely the absence of tension. It is the presence of justice. So if there is no justice, there can be no peace. So I've known, you know, Dr. King's work in school. We had to rehearse his speeches. We had plays about him. And you know, he was always a legend. He was like a family member in our home, in our house. He was someone to be revered and respected. And of course, my mother was a minister, so you know, it was all about Dr. King and his ministry. But we didn't have him. I was too young to know him at that time. But who we have had in our lifetime are people who have carried his legacy on. And I've been fortunate enough, growing up in this community, to know Dr. Al Sharpton. And he's been our person that we have looked at. He has been consistent over the years. He is constantly out there in the front line. It doesn't matter whether you agree with him or not. He has been there in this struggle. So today, as I remember Dr. King, I would not leave this place without honoring Reverend Al Sharpton. I'm not going to read all of this, but I am going to say just a portion of it, honoring Dr. Alfred Charles Sharpton. They put this on here. Jr., global American civil rights leader, and on the international opening of his biographical film, Loudmouth. Yeah. And that's what I'm honoring him for today, for being the loudmouth. You know, in school, I always got in trouble for being the loudmouth. But here today, I want to honor R. Al Sharpton for being a loudmouth. And this is on behalf of all of I know Senator Jackson was here today, and Senator Brisport was here today, Senator Gonadas. We have Natalia, newest senator over here, and of course my colleagues in the assembly. We are not here today without people like Al Sharpton. Just like we're not here today without people like Dr. King. None of us got here on our own. None of us did this alone. And yes, there are people who stand and criticize from the sidelines, but they're doing nothing. They're standing there watching. So I'm proud to be here with Dr. Sharpton today,
and all the rest of us who are doing things in the community. I see Judge Michelle Sweeting, who's been here, yes, doing it on the bench. So many others. I'm not going to say any more names.
Yes.
Down? Okay. Chair of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Caucus, hailing from the state of New York, is Assembly Member Mlk Solange.
Good afternoon, my brothers and sisters. Once again, my name is Assemblywoman Mlk Solange, and I hail from a little place called Long Island. Does anyone know about that place? Not only am I Assembly Member, I'm also Chair of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus, united in ensuring we power marginalized communities. So I want to have all the caucus members stand up so they can be acknowledged. There's 76 of us, from Buffalo to Rochester to Montauk, all the way down. There's so many of us, so I thank all my colleagues for being here. So I thank Nan for bringing us together for Martin Luther King Day. And we gather in Harlem, which is the mecca of Black power, right? Yeah. A beautiful place. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about an important policy as reparations, right? Can we turn around to our brothers and sisters and say reparations now? Reparations now! And so I'm currently the sponsor of the New York State reparations bill, where we want to convene a commission. Yeah, applaud that, yeah! Where we want to invite individuals, community members, to actually talk about what reparations will look like here in New York State. Brothers and sisters, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I say his full name because I love it, spoke of reparations for enslaved and their kings, for the injustices done and the wounds deep within. He knew that slavery was not just a thing of a past, but a trauma that continues to linger even to today. He knew that systematic racism and inequality was a threat to true freedom, and that we need to take our destiny. We need to stop the legacy of chattel slavery and the dark shadow that it casts upon us. The scars that are deep, we need to heal. And so we need to grow with this policy. He said that reparations was a step towards atonement for the sins of our forefathers. And it's not just about the money, brothers and sisters. I know it's an important part for you, but it's also about charting a new course and closing so many of the gaps that affect our communities. But Martin Luther King Jr. knew that reparations alone couldn't heal those wounds. He called for education, for healthcare, for jobs, and ensuring that we have housing for all those, to make sure that marginalized communities are lifted up. He understood that reparations was a larger effort to address the root causes of poverty, the inequality that happens in our communities, and ensuring that the future generation, our children that David Banks talked about, have access to opportunities that are fair and dignifying. We know that's not just about slavery. It's about segregation, redlining, and other forms of discrimination. It's about places like Long Island, where Black and brown communities are packed and stacked, where the legacy of racism that we see exists in the bridges that prevented Black and brown communities from accessing the beaches. Right? Yeah. But we need to use tools to keep Black communities together. Dr. Martin Luther King thought about freedom, and he knew that it was just about him. It was about us coming together. So, what do? We know that we need to get together united as one. While Black Americans are still seen as second-class citizens, we need to know that this legislation that I have before me that I'm sponsoring is not about myself or about a certain stack. It's about us. We need to push policy that will move us forward. And so let's break down the walls of segregation today, and let's uproot the system of oppression and exploitation. Let us walk towards a future where we are all equal, where the legacy of slavery is no longer a sequel, where reparations is not just a dream, but a reality, right? Yes. Where we bring healing and reconciliation. So for those acknowledging the past, yes, let's acknowledge it, but let's build a future. Let's build a future on what Dr. Martin Luther King believed in, that we are all equal together. So I thank you, everyone. Please continue following the Black, Hispanic, Puerto Rican, Asian Caucus. Just last year, we actually came out with our policy initiatives on Dr. Martin Luther King Day, and I'm telling you, we were successful. So I'm telling you, watch out for the caucus. We are organized and ready to get things done. Thank you. Representing the great borough of Manhattan as president is none other, our very own Mark Levine.
Thank you, Katrina. Happy Mlk Day, Jan. I am honored to be here with the Reverend Al Sharpton. Nobody works harder than Al Sharpton. He was up at 6 a.m. this morning live on Morning Joe. I saw you, Rev. You were very good. He hosted the president a couple hours later. He's here leading this gathering. I so appreciate you and your leadership and your voice for justice. I'm honored to be here with the Lion of Lenox Avenue. Congressmember, you still got it. Pulling no punches at 93. And I'm thrilled to be here with the great Dr. Dukes, who has taught me so much about racial justice, about healthcare advocacy, and much, much more. Now, Reverend, I want you to know that I applauded very enthusiastically as I've been here, hearing Queens shouted out several times. I applauded when the Bronx was shouted out. I applauded when Brooklyn was shouted out, I counted, 8 times. I even applauded when Chair Shaland shouted out Long Island. The only 2 people applauding were me and Tom DiNapoli. But I do want to remind you that you are, and Dr. Dukes. I do want to remind you that you are currently sitting in the borough of Manhattan. Am I right, Dale Brewer? Yes, I am right. The island at the center of the world. It's hard to be here now on this date, in this place, in this house, with these icons, and not feel the weight of history. And I am honored to currently hold an office which has an extraordinary history of borough presidents. No fewer than 5 African-American borough presidents have served in Manhattan, every one of which was a major figure in New York City history, in civil rights history, starting with a man whose name we need to say more, Hewlin Jack, who was the first African-American borough president in 1956. I think that might have been before your time, Rev, but Dr. Dukes, do you remember Borough President Jack? I think you do. He was actually from St. Lucia. He made history as a West Indian politician as well. St. Lucia showed up today. That's great. In the 60s, we had an incredible borough president in Constance Baker Motley. She was a multiple trendsetter. She was the first African-American state senator, served here in Harlem, the same district which Senator Cordell Clear now represents. She later went on to be the first African-American woman appointed as a federal judge. She was later succeeded by none other than Percy Sutton, the longest serving borough president in Manhattan's history, whose granddaughter, Keisha Sutton James, is Deputy Manhattan Borough President today. She's here now, please stand up. And Mom is here too. Oh, your sister's here too? That's wonderful. Later we had none other than the great David Dinkins. Borough President David Dinkins made history in so many ways. And more recently we had someone who was a friend, a mentor, who has supported me in so many ways in my first year in this job. C. Virginia Fields. Every single one of these 5 leaders prioritized economic justice, economic empowerment for the black community, for Harlem, for communities of color throughout New York City. Every one of them made this a major priority. Every one of them was criticized for it. But this was a priority of Dr. King himself. Despite the sanitized versions of quotes that you're seeing posted on social media today, many of which Dr. King didn't even say. You got to research that. Look at the quotes that are truly attributed to Dr. King. He spoke powerfully about economic justice. One thing that he did say when he was delivering his Nobel Peace Address in 1964, he said that poverty is nothing new. What is new is that today we have the resources to address poverty. That was true in 1964. It is even more true 57 years later. We are in the wealthiest city in the world at the wealthiest moment in history. There is no excuse for anyone in this city not having health care. After the pandemic we just came through, there is no excuse for anyone in this city not having primary health care and access to vaccines and their primary care, their annual checkups, the things they need to keep themselves safe. There is no excuse in this city that any student be at a school that's not fully funded, that doesn't just have great teachers, but a full-time social worker, a full-time nurse, a well-funded after-school program. There's no excuse for that in this city. There's no excuse for anyone being unable to find housing they can afford in New York City. Rents are now averaging $4,000 a month in Manhattan. That's unacceptable. We have to invest in the affordable housing that we need. And by the way, it's a disgrace that on this block, instead of housing, they're building a truck stop in a community with elevated rates of asthma, continuing a legacy of environmental racism. There's no excuse for that. And Madam Borough President of the Bronx, I think you agree, there is no excuse for the fact that there are tenants showing up in housing court today facing eviction who are not being afforded an attorney. We passed a law, Vanessa and I, back when we were in the council, to establish right to counsel for tenants. But the number of evictions is increasing. It has exceeded the capacity of the legal service system. There are families losing their homes today because they don't have a lawyer in housing court. There are families who are entering the shelter system today because their right to counsel is not being fulfilled. There is no excuse for that. On Mlk Day, on every day, we must do better in this wealthy city. We must attack poverty. We must create economic opportunity for tenants, for students, for small business owners, for everybody in the city. I am committed to using the powers of my office to achieve those goals, to partner with you, Nan, and everyone here uptown to fulfill the economic justice which Dr. King so eloquently pointed us towards. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
From District 35 in the borough of Brooklyn, covering areas of Prospect Heights, Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, Crown Heights, and Bed-Stuy, none other than the Honorable Crystal Hudson.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, Harlem. And the happiest of birthdays to the great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. My name is Crystal Hudson, and as mentioned, I'm a New York City Council member. We might be low down in the hierarchy, but we are closest to the people. So I'm pleased to be with you here this afternoon. And thank you to Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton for always welcoming me here in the House of Justice with open arms. Dr. King's legacy is one marked by sustained struggle. Of course, it's also a legacy of great social progress and radical achievement. But Dr. King comes to mind most when we're in need of inspiration. When in our fight for liberation we're dealt setbacks and face defeats, when our confidence and resolve cracks and the path toward equity and justice seems stacked with insurmountable obstacles. That's when Dr. King usually comes to mind. He professed that the future we deserve is within reach, but it is earned and never given. And that's what we search for in remembering and celebrating his life and legacy. In 1956, Dr. King gave a sermon at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in Morningside Heights to commemorate the second anniversary of the Supreme Court's decision in Brown versus Board of Education. In it, he spoke, "Change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle." 67 years later, it wasn't enfranchising millions of Americans and outlawing de jure segregation, but rather the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization that did the opposite, stripping millions of Americans of their previously constitutionally guaranteed right to abortion access. Instead of setting us down a path toward a stronger, more inclusive nation, Dobbs jeopardized the precedent set by countless landmark rulings, clouding our path forward, setting us back. But change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. And in no place is the need for continuous struggle more clear than in the fight for reproductive justice, where the struggle for racial equality, gender equity, and economic liberation converge to underscore the plight of Black women, Black LGBTQIA+ folks, and poor and working class people across the country in particular. Why might I take a moment to focus on abortion access in the context of today's celebration and in the context for our fight for democracy and voting rights? Because a mere 6 months ago, we saw the system rigged to go against the will of 80% of Americans and overturn access to abortion in the Dobbs case. Today, 18 states have some version of an abortion ban in place. 1/3 of people of reproductive age seeking an abortion cannot get access in their state and are forced to travel for the care they need. This is where our alleged democratic institutions leave us. Dobbs comes at a moment when Black mothers face a maternal mortality rate 3 times higher than that of their white counterparts nationally, and in this city, a rate 12 times higher. When our for-profit medical system, mired in a long history of racism, leaves the poor and working class with an impossible choice, medicine or food, life or death. Dobbs comes at a moment when the rights of LGBTQIA+ people are threatened daily and our livelihoods endangered by the state legislatures bent on perpetuating cycles of discrimination and trauma rather than offering solutions to improve the material conditions of LGBTQIA+ communities across the country. Dobbs comes at a moment when wealth and income disparities have reached such a point that social mobility has become virtually impossible. At a moment when abortion access has become a privilege afforded to some, but not all. At a moment when they banned abortion, but they're fine to open child welfare cases against us. They banned abortion, but they're okay if our kids go hungry. They banned abortion, but handcuff us when we can't pay school lunch fees. Let's be clear, pro-life means pro-cages for us. Change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. We look back, continuously learning from Dr. King and celebrating a life beaming with an earnest belief in our capability to do more for one another and a firm confidence in our choice and responsibility to loosen the chains of injustice. Happy birthday, Dr. King. May we take from your legacy the courage to be bold, compassionate, and ever disruptive, just like Reverend Sharpton, in our continued struggle for freedom. Thank you.
The first woman and African American to serve in her current capacity, hailing from the boogie down. Let's give a round of applause for our very own, the Borough President of the Bronx, Vanessa Gibson. Thank you, Katrina. Good afternoon, House of Justice. To God be all the glory. I am so grateful to be here, and all of my colleagues in government. I say thank you to everyone who is here. Thank you and God bless you. Happy Dr. King Monday. We have to realize this is a day on and not a day off. I want to honor the shepherd of this house, giving honor and really all of the accolades and the love to Reverend Al Sharpton for all the great things that Reverend Al has done. He is living out Dr. King's dream every single day. As a steward of God's people, laboring in the vineyard, helping the marginalized and the underserved, and making a difference in the lives of all people. We honor you, Reverend Al. We honor you, Mother, Dr. Hazel Dukes. God bless you. We honor you and salute you for all the great work you've done. To Congressman Charlie Rangel and so many others that have paved the way so that this African-American Caribbean woman could make history as the first ever African-American female elected Bronx Borough President. You need to understand that this is about God's plan, not my plan. I wake up every single day on purpose with a purpose because I realize that it is our time, it is our moment, it is our season, it is our purpose to make a difference. We have to honor the late, great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the greatest civil rights leader, teacher, and preacher. His life, his legacy, his labor, his leadership shall not be in vain. But what are we going to do with the power and the influence that we have today, my brothers and my sisters? The dream yet to be fulfilled. Every day we wake up on purpose, with a purpose, and we have to realize that we have to live out that dream, that pathway to racial equality and social justice in America, in this state, in this city. As the Bronx Borough President, I am not new to this work, but I'm true to this work. We have been through some things. In our borough, we are unfortunately the last in everything good and first in everything bad. But we are slowly turning around those numbers. We are creating access and opportunity and economic development and economic justice and pathways to college and careers for our young people, creating spaces where we can find and create the good paying jobs, right? On his last day, Dr. King was standing with sanitation workers. In 2023, we still stand with sanitation workers. And guess what? How many of us were out there last week, 3 days, with our essential nurses, our first responders and nurses who were on strike for 3 days, fighting for the fairest and best contract and safe staffing so that our emergency rooms are not overwhelmed, and reducing the patient to nurse ratio and filling the hundreds of vacancies of nurses. That's what it means to live out Dr. King's dream. So don't lose sight, family. Don't get distracted. Keep your eyes on the prize. As long as there is discrimination and hatred and racism in our communities, we have work to do. But guess what? Although we've been through a lot, what I've learned about my great borough of the Bronx is we turn our pain into purpose. We turn our storm into strength. Tough times don't last, but tough people do. And I know that God will always give his toughest battles to his strongest soldiers. We need to be soldiers in this movement. We need to be agents of change. We shouldn't allow our communities to be in destruction and do nothing about it. Be upstanders and not bystanders. If you see a brother, a sister out there that needs help, take them by the hand. Do something to make a difference. And my people, you understand, you don't need a title in front of your name to make a difference. Help somebody. Create footprints for the next generation of leaders so that our young people know that you can't be what you can't see. They need to look at all of us in all these spaces and see themselves and know that your block doesn't block your blessing and your zip code doesn't deny your destiny. That's what Dr. King's dream is all about. And so as we celebrate this day on and not this day off, what is most important is what we do tomorrow and the next day and the next week and the next month. What do we do to carry out and fulfill that dream with passion, with purpose, with commitment, with consistency, with dedication, with honesty, integrity, and labor of love and investment and partnerships? We need to be very intentional about the work that we are doing, because the status quo is out there. Systemic racism is out there. The pathway to success needs to be achieved by all of God's people, not just some. Mass incarceration, the school to prison pipeline, all of these things that hold us back. But guess what? I want all of you to understand, every setback that we go through is a preparation for a comeback. I need you, Nan, House of Justice, to be ready for the comeback. Because when all of God's people get together with the same blueprint, the same priorities, the same vision, we are unstoppable. Happy Dr. King Day. Let's go out and do this work that we have all been truly called to do. God bless you all. Thank you so much. All right, coming from District 70, no stranger to the National Action Network and House of Justice, our very own Queen Mother, Inez Dickens.
Hey, family! It's Harlem in the house. I want to hear it
Well, that's what I'm talking about. You know, I want to thank Reverend Sharpton for bringing us together again this year to not just celebrate, but to recognize and to teach history. Now, those of you that were here Saturday, he gave one heck of a history lesson about black political empowerment. And I mean, he went way back to teach us not only here in Harlem, but in all of America what we did. I want to just take a moment. Is Harlem aware that they had, from the district that is now about the 71st, the first black woman assemblywoman, Bessie Buchanan, came from Harlem. The very first black woman. Amongst all the other firsts that Harlem has done, we also did that. We've had electeds in the assembly from the 1940s, not just now. And I want to talk for a moment about something that our great mayor said. But I want to first quote King. Give us the ballot, and we will no longer have to worry the federal government about our basic rights. Give us the ballot, and we will no longer plead the federal government for passage of the necessary laws. And see, what that was talking about was political and economic empowerment. Now come on, listen to me for a minute, just listen for a minute. Because what I'm talking about is we need generational wealth. And I don't give a damn where you come from NYCHA, or whether you come from home ownership, whether you come from the Caribbean, Africa, the South, or the Midwest. We're entitled to generational wealth like everybody else in this country. We are taxpayers. We work hard. Now, the government may say, oh, you don't deserve it. I'll be doggone if we don't. Hazel has stood up. She's traveled, not just in this city, in this state. She's gone throughout this whole nation and possibly the world, talking about political and economic empowerment. If we do not begin to own our own communities, whether it's some of the businesses, whether it's some of the bodegas, as they call them, we used to call them, you know, the store on the corner. You know, if we don't begin to own some of this home ownership, then we are going to lose our community, because others are going to come in and take it over and move us out. And if you don't believe me, look at gentrification.